Okay, at the end of book 2, the Nolan family had to move because of an incident with Sissy, embarrassing them so badly that they had to move out of the neighborhood. Also, they sadly decided that Sissy can't come to their house anymore. So that's Francie's Aunt Sissy. This works for me because, yeah, it isn't like we would be able to really read along anyway, so this view is really nice because you can see other things around the book. Okay, good. I can still zoom out a little bit too if you want. I feel like this is a little tight, frankly, so I was going to zoom out 1. And I think you can see more this way. I hope I didn't just disconnect my camera. Nope, looks good. Okay. So this way you can still see. Also, I hope there's enough light. There was, when I started to set up, there was like a huge contrast between the light that was coming in from the skylight and then the amount of light that was in the room, and it kind of darkened everything. But this is about as bright as I can get it. It is kind of looks cozy though. All right, I can read it, and I guess that's what's important. Okay. 4 rooms made up the new flat. They led one into the other and were called railroad rooms. The high, narrow kitchen faced on the yard, which was a flagstone walk surrounding a square of cement-like sour earth out of which nothing could possibly grow. Yet there was this tree growing in the yard. When Francie first saw it, it was only up to the 2nd story. She could look down on it from her window. It looked like a packed crowd of people of assorted sizes standing umbrella protected in the rain. There was a lean clothes pole in the back of the yard from which 6 wash lines on pulleys connected with 6 kitchen windows. The neighborhood boys kept themselves in pocket money by climbing the poles to replace a wash line when it slipped off a pulley. It was believed that the boys climbed the pole in the dead of night and sneaked a line off the pulley to guarantee the next day's dime. On a sunny, windy day, it was pretty to see the lines filled, the square white sheets taking the wind like the sails of a storybook boat, and the red, green, and yellow clothes straining at the wooden pins as though they had life. The pole stood against a brick wall, which was the windowless side of the neighborhood school. Francie found that no 2 bricks were alike when she looked real close. It was a soothing rhythm the way they were put together with crumbly, thin lines of white mortar. They glowed when the sun shone on them. They smelled warm and porous when Francie pressed her cheek against them. They were the first to receive the rain, and they gave off a wet clay odor that was like the smell of life itself. In the winter, when the first snow was too delicate to last on the sidewalks, it clung to the rough surface of the brick and was like fairy lace. 4 feet of the schoolyard faced on Francie's yard and was segregated from it by an iron mesh fence. The few times Francie got to play in the yard, it was preempted by the boy who lived on the ground floor who would let no one in it while he was there. She managed to be there at recess time. She watched the horde of children playing in the yard. Recess consisted of getting several hundred children herded into this small stone-paved enclosure and then getting them out again. Once in the yard, there was no room for games. The children milled about angrily and raised their voices in one steady, monotonous shrieking, which continued unabating for 5 minutes. It was cut off, as if with a sharp knife, when the end of recess bell clanged. Okay, hang on just a second. Okay, excuse me, had to sniffle. For an instant after the bell, there was dead silence and frozen motion. Then the milling changed to pushing. The children seemed as desperately anxious to get in as they had been to get out. The high shrieking changed to subdued wailing as they fought their way back. Oh, that sounds like fun, huh? Francie was in her yard one mid-afternoon when a little girl came out alone into the schoolyard and importantly clapped 2 blackboard erasers together to free them from chalk dust. To Francie, watching, her face close to the iron mesh, this seemed the most fascinating occupation ever devised. Mama had told her that this was a task reserved for teachers' pets. To Francie, pets meant cats, dogs, and birds. She vowed that when she was old enough to go to school that she would meow, bark, and chirp as best she could so that she would be a pet and get to clap the erasers together. On this afternoon, she watched with a heart full of admiration in her eyes. The clapper, aware of Francie's admiration, showed off. She clapped the erasers on the brick wall, on the stone walk, and as a finale, behind her back. She spoke to Francie. "Want to see 'em real close?" Francie nodded shyly. The girl brought an eraser close to the mesh. Francie poked a finger through to touch the varicolored felt layers blended together by a film of powdered chalk. As she was about to touch this soft beautifulness, the little girl snatched it away and spat full in Francie's face. Francie closed her eyes tightly to keep the hurt, bitter tears from spilling out. The other girl stood there curiously, waiting for the tears. When none came, she taunted. "Why don't you bust out crying, you dockle? Want I should spit in your face again?" Francie turned and went down into the cellar and sat in the dark a long time, waiting until the waves of hurt stopped breaking over her. It was the first of many disillusionments that were to come as her capacity to feel things grew. She never liked blackboard erasers after that. Ugh, starting off on a grim note. "Oh, hey, Dead Chrome, welcome in. How you doing?" I know this book is kind of grim. It has its good moments. It's really interesting though, like as a snapshot of a time, in this country's history. Slept all day. Ooh. Well, I'm afraid this might put you back to sleep, but you're more than welcome to hang out, of course. Okay, we're going back to the apartment now. The kitchen was living room, dining room, and cooking room. There were 2 long, narrow windows in one wall. An iron coal range was recessed in another wall. Above the stove, the recess was made of coral-colored bricks and creamy white plaster. It had a stone mantelpiece and a slate hearthstone on which Francie could draw pictures with chalk. Next to the stove was a water boiler which got hot when the fire was going. Often on a cold day, Francie came in chilled and put her arms around the boiler and pressed her frosty cheek gratefully against its warm silverness. Next to the boiler was a pair of soapstone wash tubs with a hinged wooden cover. The partition could be removed and the 2 thrown into one for a bathtub. It didn't make a very good bathtub. Sometimes when Francie sat in it, the cover banged down on her head. The bottom was rubbly, and she came out of what should have been a refreshing bath, all sore from sitting on that wet roughness. Then there were 4 faucets to contend with. No matter how the child tried to remember that they were inflexibly there and wouldn't give way, she would jump up suddenly out of the soapy water and get her back whacked good on a faucet. Francie had a perpetual angry welt on her back. Following the kitchen, okay, so that was all the kitchen. Following the kitchen, there were 2 bedrooms, one leading into the other. An air shaft dimensioned like a coffin was built into the bedrooms. The windows were small and dingy gray. You could open an air shaft window maybe, if you used a chisel and hammer, but when you did, you were rewarded with a blast of cold, dank air. The air shaft was topped by a miniature slant-roof skylight, whose heavy, opaque, wrinkled glass was protected from breakage by heavy iron netting. The sides were corrugated iron slats. This arrangement supposedly supplied light and air to the bedrooms. But the heavy glass, iron fencing, and dirt of many years refused to filter the light through. The openings in the sides were choked with dust, soot, and cobwebs. No air could come in, but stubbornly enough, rain and snow could get in. On stormy days, the wooden bottom of the air shaft was wet and smoky and gave out a tomby smell. Tomby, like a tomb. Tomby. The air shaft was a horrible invention. Even with the windows tightly sealed, it served as a sounding box, and you could hear everybody's business. Rats scurried about the bottom. There was always the danger of fire. A match absently tossed into the air shaft by a drunken teamster, under the impression that he was throwing it into the yard or street, would set the house afire in a moment. There were vile things cluttering up the bottom. Since this bottom couldn't be reached by man, the windows being too small to admit the passage of a body, it served as a fearful repository for things that people wanted to put out of their lives. Rusted razor blades and bloody cloths were the most innocent items. Once Francie looked down into the air shaft. She thought of what the priest said about purgatory and figured it must be like the air shaft bottom, only on a larger scale. When Francie went into the parlor, she passed through the bedrooms, shuddering and with her eyes shut. Ugh. That reminds me of To Kill a Mockingbird. Such an eventful book. The parlor or front room was the room. Its two high, narrow windows faced on the exciting street. The third floor was they're on the third floor. I think they're on the top floor of this building. The third floor was so high up that street noises were muted into a comforting sound. Also, let me know if you're not able to hear me. I'm going to adjust my microphone. The room was a place of dignity. It had its own door leading into the hall. Company could be admitted without having to walk through the bedrooms from the kitchen. The high walls were covered with a somber wallpaper, dark brown with golden stripes. The windows had inside shutters of slatted wood which telescoped into a narrow space on either side. Francie spent many happy hours pulling out these hinged shutters and watching them fold back again at a touch of her hand. It was a never-tiring miracle that which could cover a whole window and blot out light and air could still meekly compress itself in its little closet and present an innocently paneled front to the eye. A low parlor stove was built into a black marble fireplace. Only the front half of the stove was in view. It looked like a giant halved melon with the round side out. It was made of numerous isinglass windows with just enough thin carved iron to form a framework. At Christmas time, the only time Katie could afford to have a fire in the parlor, all of the little windows glowed and Francie felt a great joy sitting there, feeling the warmth and watching the windows change from rosy red to amber as the night wore on. And when Katie came in and lit the gas, chasing the shadows away and paling the light in the stove windows, it was like a great sin that she committed. The most wonderful thing about the front room was the piano. This was a miracle that you could pray for all your life and it would never come to pass. But there it stood in the Nolan parlor, a real true miracle that had come without a wish or a prayer. The piano had been left there by the previous tenants who could not afford to pay to have it moved. Piano moving in those days was a project. No piano could be gotten down those narrow, steep stairs. Pianos had to be bundled up, roped, and hoisted out of the windows with an enormous pulley on the roof, and with much shouting, arm waving, and brass hatting on the part of the boss mover. The street had to be roped off, the policeman had to keep the crowds back, and children had to play hooky from school when there was a piano moving. There was always that great moment when the wrapped bolt swung clear of the window and twisted dizzily in the air for a moment before it righted itself. Then began the slow, perilous descent while the children cheered hoarsely. It was a job that cost $15, 3 times what it cost to move all the rest of the furniture. So the owner asked Katie could she leave it and would Katie mind it for her? Katie was glad to give her the promise. Wistfully, the woman asked Katie not to let it get damp or cold, to leave the bedroom doors open in winter so that a little heat would get through from the kitchen and prevent warping. Can you play it? Katie asked her. No, said the woman sorrowfully. No one in the family can play. I wish I could. Why did you ever buy it? It was in a rich house. The people were selling it cheap. I wanted it so much. No, I couldn't play it, but it was so beautiful. It dresses up the whole room. Katie promised to take good care of it until the woman could afford to send for it, but as things turned out, the woman never did send for it, and the Nolans had this beautiful thing for always. It was small and made of black polished wood that glowed darkly. The front of thin veneers was cut out to make a pretty pattern, and there was old rose silk behind this fretted wood design. Its lid did not fold back in sections like other uprights. It just turned back and rested against the designed wood like a lovely, dark, polished shell. There was a candle holder on either side. You could put pure white candles in them and play by the candlelight, which threw dreamy shadows over the creamy ivory keys. And you could see the keys again in the dark cover. When the Nolans walked into the front room on their first possessive tour of inspection, the piano was the only thing that Francie saw. She tried to get her arms around it, but it was too big. She had to be content to hug the faded rose brocade stool. Oh, that's so cute. Katie looked at the piano with dancing eyes. She had noticed a white card in the flat window below which said piano lessons. Katie had an idea. Johnny sat on the magic stool which turned around and went up or down according to your size, and played. He couldn't play, of course. He couldn't read notes in the first place, but he knew a few chords. He could sing a song and strike a chord now and then, and really, it sounded as though he were singing to music. He struck a minor chord, looked into the eyes of his oldest child, and smiled a crooked smile. Francie smiled back, her heart waiting in anticipation. He struck the minor chord again, held it. To its soft echo, he sang in his clear, true voice, Maxwellton's braes are bonny, when early fades the dew. Chord, chord. And 'twas there that Annie Laurie guide me her promise true. Chord, 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 chord. Francie looked away, not wanting Papa to see her tears. She was afraid he'd ask her why she was crying, and she wouldn't be able to tell him. She loved him, and she loved the piano. She could find no excuse for her easy tears. Katie spoke. Her voice had some of the old soft tenderness in it which Johnny had been missing in the last year or so. Is that an Irish song, Johnny? Scotch. I never heard you sing it before. No, I guess not. It's just a song I know. I never sing it because it's not the kind of song people want to hear at the rackets where I work. They'd sooner hear Call Me Up Some Rainy Afternoon. Except when they're drunk, then nothing but Sweet Adeline will do. They were quickly settled in the new place. The familiar furniture looked strange. Francie sat on a chair and was surprised that it felt the same as it had in Lorimer Street. She felt different. Why didn't the chair feel different? The front room looked pretty after Papa and Mama got it fixed up. There was a bright green carpet which had great pink roses. There were starched cream-colored lace curtains for the windows, a table with a marble top for the center of the room, and a 3-piece green plush parlor suit. A bamboo stand in the corner held a plush-covered album in which there were pictures of the Romilly sisters as babies lying on their stomachs on a fur rug, and patient-looking great-aunts standing at the shoulders of seated, big-mustached husbands. Little souvenir cups stood on the small shelves. The cups were pink and blue and had gold-encrusted designs of blue forget-me-nots and red American Beauty roses. There were phrases like, "Remember me" and "True friendship" painted in gold. The tiny cups and saucers were memories of Katie's old girlfriends, and Francie was never permitted to play house with them. On the bottom shelf stood a curly bone-white conch shell with a delicate rosy interior. The children loved it dearly and had given it an affectionate name, Tootsie. When Francie held it to her ear, it sang of the great sea. Sometimes for the delight of his children, Johnny listened to the shell, then held it dramatically at arm length, looked at it meltingly, and sang, "Upon the shore I found a shell, I held it to my ear. I listened gladly while it sang, a sea song sweet and clear." Later, Francie saw the sea for the first time when Johnny took them to Canarsie. The sea was remarkable only in that it sounded like the tiny sweet roar of Tootsie, the conch shell. Okay, quick break. I'm going to pour a little bit more tea. For some reason, my nose got stuffed up, so I need to kind of snuff that, and I don't really want you guys to hear that, so one moment. OMG, I could absolutely not imagine moving a piano in New York City, no thanks. Yeah, especially in the tenements. I guess everything's super close together. Saribot, I guess, took care of the spam that came in. Thank you, Saribot. Let me have a quick bite of popcorn here. Oh, it's really sticking together. It's kind of cute, though, with all of the little, swirls on it. That was possibly too big of a bite. Okay. The neighborhood stores are an important part of a city child's life. They are his contact with the supplies that keep life going. They hold the beauty that his soul longs for. They hold the unattainable that he can only dream and wish for. Francie liked the pawn shop almost the best, not for the treasures prodigiously thrown into its barred windows, not for the shadowy adventure of shawled women slipping into the side entrance, but for the three large golden balls that hung high above the shop and gleamed in the sun or swayed languorously like heavy golden apples when the wind blew. There was a bakery store to one side of it which sold beautiful Charlotte Russe with red candied cherries on their whipped cream tops for those who were rich enough to buy. On the other side was Gollander's paint shop. There was a stand in front of it from which was suspended a plate with a dramatically mended crack across it, and a hole bored into the bottom, from which hung a heavy rock suspended on a chain. This proved how strong Major's cement was. Some said the plate was made of iron and painted to resemble cracked china, but Francie preferred to believe it was a real plate that had been broken and then made whole again by the miracle of the cement. The most interesting store was housed in a little shanty which had been there when the Indians prowled through Williamsburg. It looked queer among the tenements with its tiny small paned windows, clapboards, and steep slanting roof. The store had a great small paneled bay window behind which a dignified man sat at a table and made cigars, long, thin, dark brown ones which sold 4 for a nickel. He chose the outside leaf very carefully from a hand of tobacco and filled it expertly with bits of tobacco of mixed browns and rolled it all very beautifully so that it was tight and thin and the ends had squared corners. A craftsman of the old school, he scorned progress. He refused to have gaslight in his store. Sometimes when the days grew dark early and he still had a lot of cigars to finish, he worked by candlelight. He had a wooden Indian outside his store which stood in a threatening stance on a wooden block. He held a tomahawk in one hand and a hand of tobacco in the other. He wore Roman sandals with the lacings coming to his knees, a short skirt of feathers, and a war bonnet, all of which were painted in bright reds, blues, and yellows. The cigar maker gave him a fresh coat of paint 4 times a year and carried him inside when it rained. The neighborhood children called the Indian Aunt Mamie. Okay, that is just a weird image when you think about it. One of Francie's favorite stores was the one which sold nothing but tea, coffee, and spices. It was an exciting place of rows of lacquered bins and strange, romantic, exotic odors. There were a dozen scarlet coffee bins with adventurous words written across the front in black china ink. Brazil, Argentine, Turkish, Java, mixed blend. The tea was in smaller bins, beautiful bins with sloping covers. They read, Oolong, Formosa, Orange Pico, Black China, Flowering Almond, Jasmine, Irish Tea. The spices were in miniature bins behind the counter. Their names marched in a row across the shelves. Cinnamon, cloves, ginger, allspice, ball nutmeg, curry, peppercorns, sage, thyme, marjoram. All pepper when purchased was ground in a tiny pepper mill. There was a large hand-turned coffee grinder. The beans were put into a shiny brass hopper, and the great wheel was turned with 2 hands. The fragrant grounds pattered down into a scarlet box that was shaped like a scoop at the back. The Nolans ground their coffee at home. Francie loved to see Mama sitting debonairly in the kitchen with the coffee mill clutched between her knees, grinding away with a furious turn of her left wrist, and looking up to talk sparklingly to Papa while the room filled up with the rich, satisfying odor of freshly ground coffee. The tea man had a wonderful pair of scales, 2 gleaming brass plates which had been rubbed and polished daily for more than 25 years, until now they were thin and delicate and looked like burnished gold. When Francie bought a pound of coffee or an ounce of pepper, she watched while a polished silver block with the weight mark was placed in one scale, and the fragrant purchase was conveyed gently by means of a silver-like scoop into the other. Francie, watching, held her breath while the scoop dropped in a few more grains or gently eased some out. It was a beautiful, peaceful second when both golden plates were stilled and stood there in perfect balance. It was as if nothing wrong could happen in a world where things balanced so stilly. The mystery of mysteries to Francie was the Chinaman's one-windowed store. The Chinaman wore his pigtail wound around his head. That was so he could go back to China if he wanted to, Mama said. Once he cut it off, they would never let him return. He shuffled back and forth silently in his black felt slippers and listened patiently to instructions about shirts. When Francie spoke to him, he folded his hands in the wide sleeves of his Nanking shirt coat and kept his eyes on the ground. She thought that he was wise and contemplative and listened with all his heart. But he understood nothing of what she said, having little English. All he knew was ticky and shirty. When Francie brought her father's soiled shirt there, he whisked it under the counter, took a square of mysteriously textured paper, dipped a thin brush into a pot of India ink, made a few strokes, and gave her this magic document in exchange for a common dirty shirt. It seemed a wonderful barter. The inside of the store had a clean, warm but fragile scent, like odorless flowers in a hot room. Ooh, I just love that. He did the washing in some mysterious recess, and it must have been in the dead of night, because all day, from 7 in the morning until 10 at night, he stood in the store at his clean ironing board, pushing a heavy black iron back and forth. The iron must have had a tiny gasoline arrangement inside to keep it hot. Francie did not know this. She thought it part of the mystery of his race that he could iron with an iron never heated on a stove. She had a vague theory that the heat came from something he used in place of starch in the shirts and collars. Oh, I love this. When Francie bought a ticket and a dime back and pushed them across the counter, he gave her the wrapped shirt and 2 lychee nuts in exchange. Francie loved these lychee nuts. There was a crisp, easily broken shell and the soft sweet meat inside. Inside the meat was a hard stone that no child had ever been able to break open. It was said that this stone contained a smaller stone, and that the smaller stone contained a smaller stone, which contained a yet smaller stone, and so on. It was said that soon the stones got so small you could only see them with a magnifying glass, and those smaller ones got still smaller until you couldn't see them with anything, but they were always there and would never stop coming. It was Francie's first experience with infinity. My light went out. Just a moment. I gotta make sure it's plugged in. Can you guys hang on just a sec? Well, that was certainly interesting. I think my lamp might not be plugged in. And it does have a battery, but after a while it goes out. Okay, it is plugged in, so I don't know what the issue was. That was weird, though. I don't know if you saw it. If you weren't watching, if you're just listening, you probably would never have noticed, but it suddenly kind of got dark. Love that she has theories. Yeah, I know. The magic of the world, you know, to kids, like their imagination. Okay, just a second. I am going to put a pillow underneath me and sit up a little taller. Oh, that feels good. The best times were when he had to make change. Oh, we're still at the laundry. He brought out a small wooden frame strung with thin rods on which there were blue, red, yellow, and green balls. He slid the balls up the brass rods, pondered swiftly, clicked them all back into place, and announced, "Dirty 9 cents." The tiny balls told him how much to charge and how much change to give. Oh, to be a Chinaman, wished Francie, and have such a pretty toy to count on. Oh, to eat all the lychee nuts she wanted, and to know the mystery of the iron that was ever hot and yet never stood on a stove. Oh, to paint those symbols with a slight brush and a quick turn of the wrist, and to make a clear black mark as fragile as a piece of a butterfly wing. That was the mystery of the Orient in Brooklyn. Okay, I am going to make some more tea. Oh, this makes a good bookmark holding place here. Also, this little tea has gotten cold, so I'm going to feed it to Poo-Poo-chan here, who's also listening. There we go. Yeah, we're getting to some parts of the story which I've completely forgotten about, so it's kind of fun. Alrighty. I love the idea of that coffee, tea, and spice store, though. Like, that really does stir the imagination, doesn't it? I mean, I've been to shops like that, but not in the 1900s. The early 1900s, I think, is when this was happening. Okay, while that's steeping, I'm going to go ahead and tear off another piece of this snowflake. This is really pretty. Let's see, let's go with this kind of odd shaped piece here. Just rip it off. It's kind of like monkey bread a little bit. But not enough like monkey bread that I could just pull this off without any kind of assistance. Alrighty. We're gonna fill up on bread now. I'll have to find something healthy for dinner that doesn't involve bread, because we also had cinnamon rolls for breakfast, so shouldn't be hard. We just went shopping yesterday. Oh, potatoes. Potatoes could be good. You love monkey bread. It just kind of reminds me of it a little bit, as far as the construction, you know. Oh, you can really see the or can you? The bean paste is right here. The part that I just smooshed with my finger is actually bean paste. I think it all looks like some kind of cinnamon sugar filling, but it's not. I'll just rest that little piece there. Next, we'll be getting to piano lessons. Piano lesson time. I remember I like this guy one a lot. It's very simple, like I said, very inexpensive, but extremely functional. This knob here is flared, so like you never get your finger hot, and actually it's a great size for my hand to just be able to hold the entire thing with the saucer as well, and it just pours very easily. Yeah, it's just easy to handle. Some teaware, you know, looks better than it functions, but this is a really functional, very basic piece. Ooh, what a color. It's very rich. Oh, plus reflection, but get up there maybe less. No, ring light is it's just gonna steal the show here. Oh, that is so great with that cinnamon. It really does sort of complement the cinnamon flavor in the bread. Okay. Okay. Chapter 17. Piano lessons, magic words. As soon as the Nolans were settled, Katie called on the lady whose card announced piano lessons. There were two Miss Tinmores. Miss Lizzie taught piano and Miss Maggie cultivated the voice. The charge was 25 cents per lesson. Katie proposed a bargain. She'd do 1 hour's cleaning work for the Tinmores in exchange for a lesson each week. Miss Lizzie demurred, claiming her time had more value than Katie's time. Katie argued that time was time. Finally, she got Miss Lizzie to agree that time was time, and arrangements were made. Oh, hey, Texas, welcome in. Hi there. Hope you're doing well. Sorry I missed your stream yesterday. I had not really a doctor's appointment, but I had an appointment to go get some blood tests done, and it was like right at that time. So I saw you were making Japanese food, but I didn't see what you ended up making it all. So please feel free to put that in the stream. And thank you for doing that shout out. Blueberry, thank you. The history-making day of the first lesson arrived. Francie and Neely were instructed to sit in the front room during the lesson and to keep their eyes and ears open. Okay, so Mom is trying to get extra value out of her piano lesson. You know, fair enough. I could see that. A chair was placed for the teacher. The children sat side by side on the other side of the piano. Katie nervously adjusted and readjusted the seat, and the three sat waiting. Miss Tinmore arrived on the dot of 5. Although she only came from downstairs, she was formally attired in street clothes. A taut, spotted veil was stretched over her face. Her hat was the breast and wing of a red... Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to start that again. Her hat was the breast and wing of a red bird, tormentingly pierced by 2 hat pins. Francie stared at the cruel hat. Mama took her into the bedroom and whispered that the bird wasn't a bird at all, just some feathers glued together, and that she mustn't stare. She believed Mama, yet her eyes kept going back to the tormented effigy. Okay, so it wasn't real. Never mind. Miss Tinmore brought everything with her but the piano. She had a nickel alarm clock and a battered metronome. The clock said 5 o'clock. She set it for 6 o'clock and stood it on the piano. She took the privilege of using up part of the precious hour. She removed her pearl gray, skin-tight kid gloves, blew into each finger, smoothed and folded them, and placed them on the piano. She undid her veil and threw it back over her hat. She limbered up her fingers, glanced at the clock, was satisfied that she had taken enough minutes, started the metronome, took her seat, and the lesson began. Francie was so fascinated by the metronome that she found it hard to listen to what Miss Tinmore said and to watch the way she placed Mama's hands on the keys. She weaved dreams in time to the soothing, monotonous clicking. As for Neely, his round blue eyes rolled back and forth, following the little swinging rod until he hypnotized himself into unconsciousness. His mouth relaxed and his blonde head rolled over on his shoulder. A little bubble came and went as he breathed moistly. Katie dared not wake him lest Miss Tinmore catch on that she was teaching 3 for the price of 1. The metronome clicked on dreamily. The clock ticked querulously. Miss Tinmore, as if not trusting the metronome, counted 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Katie's work-swollen fingers struggled doggedly with her first scale. Time passed and it grew dark in the room. Suddenly the alarm clock rang out shatteringly. Francie's heart jumped and Neely fell off his chair. The first lesson was ended. Katie's words tumbled over each other in gratitude. Even if I never take another lesson, I could go on with what you taught me today. You are a good teacher. Miss Tinmore, while pleased by the flattery, nevertheless told Katie what was what. I won't charge extra for the children. I just want you to know you're not fooling me. Katie blushed and the children looked down on the floor, ashamed of being found out. I will permit the children to stay in the room. Katie thanked her. Miss Tinmore stood up and waited. Katie verified the time she was to do Miss Tinmore's housework. Still she waited. Katie felt that something was expected of her. Finally, she inquired, yes? Miss Tinmore flushed a shell pink and spoke proudly. The ladies, where I give lessons, well, they offer me a cup of tea afterwards. She put her hand to her heart and explained vaguely, those stairs. Would you sooner take coffee? Katie asked. We have no tea. Gladly. Miss Tinmore sat down in relief. Katie rushed out to the kitchen and heated the coffee, which was always standing on the stove. While it was warming, she put a sugar bun and a spoon on a round tin tray. In the meantime, Neely had fallen asleep on the sofa. Miss Tinmore and Francie sat exchanging stares. Finally, Miss Tinmore asked, What are you thinking about, little girl? Just thinking, Francie said. Sometimes I see you sitting on the gutter curb for hours. What do you think of then? Nothing. I just tell myself stories. Miss Tinmore pointed at her sternly. Little girl, you'll be a story writer when you grow up. It was a command rather than a statement. Yes, ma'am, agreed Francie out of politeness. Katie came in with the tray. This may not be as refined as you're used to, she apologized, but it's what we have in the house. It's very good, stated Miss Tinmore daintily. Then she concentrated on trying not to wolf it down. To tell the truth, the Tinmores lived on the... Oh! Hey, thanks, Backpack Barbs. Also, welcome in. Have some cake. Well, I can have some bread. How are you doing? Thank you for your
Oolong
support.
5 yum, oolong 5 yum, oolong 5 yum.
That's so funny. Hey, Barbs, were you streaming earlier today? I think you were, and I think I missed it, but I think I saw you, or maybe it was yesterday. Yeah, the song startled me, but welcome in. We're reading. We're reading today. We're in book 3 of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. The others, if you want to, learn the background of the story, it's all on the VODs. Okay, where was I? Oh, to tell the truth, the Tinmores lived on the, quote, tea they got from their pupils. A few lessons a day at a quarter a lesson did not make for prosperity. After paying their rent, there was little left to eat on. Most of the ladies served them weak tea and soda crackers. The ladies knew what was polite and would come through with a cup of tea, but they had no intention of supplying a meal and paying a quarter too. So Miss Tinmore came to look forward to the hour at the Nolans. The coffee was heartening, and there was always a bun or a bologna sandwich to sustain her. After each lesson, Katie taught the children what she had been taught. She made them practice half an hour each day. In time, all 3 of them learned to play the piano. Awesome. Oh, nope, I had a no bones day today. Fair enough. You can just totally chill and relax here. When Johnny heard that Maggie Tinmore gave voice lessons, he figured that he could do no less than Katie. He offered to repair a broken sash cord in one of the Tinmore windows in exchange for 2 voice lessons for Francie. Johnny, who had never even seen a sash cord in all his life, got a hammer and a screwdriver and took the whole window frame out of its case. He looked at the broken rope, and that was as far as he could go. He experimented and got nowhere. His heart was willing, but his skill was nil. In attempting to get the window back in to keep out the cold winter rain that was blowing into the room while he was figuring out about the sash cord, he broke a pane of glass. The deal fell through. The Tinmores had to get a regular window man in to fix it. Katie had to do 2 washings free for the girls to make up for it, and Francie's voice lessons were abandoned forever. Oh, Dad. Oh, well. Okay, quick break between chapters. So I'm having this interesting Japanese bread. It is huge. It's the size of a small dinner plate. And it's a cinnamon snowflake. In case you're wondering what that is over there. And we're having some oolong tea from Nepal, which looks to be pretty highly oxidized as the color's really red. Okay. School days. Oh, finally, are we actually going to get to school yet? School days were eagerly anticipated by Francie. She wanted all the things that she thought came with school. She was a lonely child, and she longed for the companionship of other children. She wanted to drink from the school water fountains in the yard. The faucets were inverted, and she thought that soda water came out instead of plain water. She had heard Mama and Papa speak of the schoolroom. She wanted to see the map that pulled down like a shade. Most of all, she wanted school supplies. A notebook and tablet and pencil box with a sliding top filled with new pencils, an eraser, a little tin pencil sharpener made in the shape of a cannon, a pen wiper, and a 6-inch softwood yellow ruler. Before school, there had to be vaccination. That was the law. How it was dreaded. When the health authorities tried to explain to the poor and illiterate that vaccination was a giving of the harmless form of smallpox to work up immunity against the deadly form, the parents didn't believe it. All they got out of the explanation was that germs would be put into a healthy child's body. Some foreign-born parents refused to permit their children to be vaccinated. They were not allowed to enter school. Then the law got after them for keeping the children out of school. A free country, they asked? You should live so long. What's free about it, they reasoned, when the law forces you to educate your children and then endangers their lives to get them into school? Weeping mothers brought bawling children to the health center for inoculation. They carried on as though bringing their innocence to the slaughter. The children screamed hysterically at the first sight of the needle, and their mothers, waiting in the anteroom, threw their shawls over their heads and keened loudly as if wailing for the dead. Some things never change, huh? Francie was 7 and Neely 6. Katie had held Francie back, wishing both children to enter school together so that they could protect each other against the older children. On a dreadful Saturday in August, she stopped in the bedroom to speak to them before she went off to work. She awakened them and gave instructions. Now, when you get up, wash yourselves good, and when it gets to be 11 o'clock, go around the corner to the public health place. Tell them to vaccinate you because you're going to school in September. Francie began to tremble. Neely burst into tears. You coming with us, Mama? Francie pleaded. I've got to go to work. Who's going to do my work if I don't? Asked Katie, covering up her conscience with indignation. Francie said nothing more. Katie knew that she was letting them down, but she couldn't help it. She just couldn't help it. Yes, she should go with them to lend the comfort and authority of her presence, but she knew she couldn't stand the ordeal. Yet they had to be vaccinated. Her being with them or somewhere else couldn't take that fact away. So why shouldn't one of the three be spared? Besides, she said to her conscience, it's a hard and bitter world. They've got to live in it. Let them get hardened young to take care of themselves. I'll tell you what, this sounds so much like my mother, it's not even funny. I know I told you that this book reminds me of my own family, but yikes. Papa's going with us then, said Francie hopefully. Papa's at headquarters waiting for a job. He won't be home all day. You're big enough to go alone. Besides, it won't hurt. Neely wailed in a higher key. Katie could hardly stand that. She loved the boy so much. Part of her reason for not going with them was that she couldn't bear to see the boy hurt, not even by a pinprick. Almost she decided to go with them, but no. If she went, she'd lose half a day's work and she'd have to make it up on Sunday morning. Besides, she'd be sick afterwards. They'd manage somehow without her. She hurried off to her work. Francie tried to console the terrified Neely. Some older boys had told him that they cut your arm off when they got you in the health center. To take his mind off the thing, Francie took him down to the yard and they made mud pies. They quite forgot to wash, as Mama had told them to. They almost forgot about 11 o'clock. The mud pie making was so beguiling. Their hands and arms got very dirty playing in the mud. At 10 to 11, Mrs. Gaddis hung out the window and yelled down that their mother had told her to remind them when it was near 11 o'clock. Neely finished off his last mud pie, watering it with his tears. Francie took his hand, and with slow, dragging steps, the children walked around the corner. They took their place on a bench. Next to them sat a Jewish mama who clutched a large 6-year-old boy in her arms and wept and kissed his forehead passionately from time to time. Other mothers sat there with grim suffering furrowed on their faces. Behind the frosted glass door, where the terrifying business was going on, there was a steady bawling punctuated by a shrill scream, resumption of the bawling, and then a pale child would come out with a strip of pure white gauze about his left arm. His mother would rush and grab him and with a foreign curse and a shaken fist at the frosted door, hurry him out of the torture chamber. Francie went in trembling. She had never seen a doctor or a nurse in all of her small life. The whiteness of the uniforms, the shiny, cruel instruments laid out on a napkin on a tray, the smell of antiseptics, and especially the cloudy sterilizer with its bloody red cross filled her with tongue-tied fright. The nurse pulled up her sleeve and swabbed a spot clean on her left arm. Francie saw the white doctor coming towards her with the cruelly poisoned needle. He loomed larger and larger until he seemed to blend into a great needle. She closed her eyes, waiting to die. Nothing happened. She felt nothing. She opened her eyes slowly, hardly daring to hope that it was all over. She found to her agony that the doctor was still there, poised needle and all. He was staring at her arm in distaste. Francie looked too. She saw a small white area on a dirty dark brown arm. She heard the doctor talking to the nurse. Filth, filth, filth from morning to night. I know they're poor, but they could wash. Water is free and soap is cheap. Look at this arm, nurse. The nurse looked and clucked in horror. Francie stood there with the hot flame points of shame burning her face. The doctor was a Harvard man interning at the neighborhood hospital. Once a week, he was obligated to put in a few hours at one of the free clinics. He was going into a smart practice in Boston when his internship was over. Adopting the phraseology of the neighborhood, he referred to his Brooklyn internship as going through purgatory when he wrote to his socially prominent fiancée in Boston. The nurse was a Williamsburg girl. You could tell that by her accent. The child of poor Polish immigrants, she had been ambitious, worked days in a sweatshop, and gone to school at night. Somehow, she had gotten her training. She hoped someday to marry a doctor. She didn't want anyone to know she had come from the slums. After the doctor's outburst, Francie stood hanging her head. She was a dirty girl. That's what the doctor meant. He was talking more quietly now, asking the nurse how that kind of people could survive, that it would be a better world if they were all sterilized and couldn't breed anymore. Did that mean he wanted her to die? Would he do something to make her die because her hands and arms were dirty from the mud pies? She looked at the nurse. To Francie, all women were mamas like her own mother and Aunt Sissy and Aunt Evie. She thought the nurse might say something like, maybe this little girl's mother works and didn't have time to wash her good this morning, or, you know how it is, doctor, children will play in dirt. But what the nurse actually said was, I know, isn't it terrible? I sympathize with you, doctor. There is no excuse for these people living in filth. A person who pulls himself up from a low environment via the bootstrap route has two choices. Having risen above his environment, he can forget it, or he can rise above it and never forget it and keep compassion and understanding in his heart for those he has left behind him in the cruel upclimb. The nurse had chosen the forgetting way, yet as she stood there, she knew that years later she would be haunted by the sorrow in the face of that starveling child, and that she would wish bitterly that she had said a comforting word then and done something toward the saving of her immortal soul. She had the knowledge that she was small, but she lacked the courage to be otherwise. When the needle jabbed, Francie never felt it. The waves of hurt, started by the doctor's words, were racking her body and drove out all other feeling. While the nurse was expertly tying a strip of gauze around her arm and the doctor was putting his instrument in the sterilizer and taking out a fresh needle, Francie spoke up. My brother is next. His arm is just as dirty as mine, so don't be surprised, and you don't have to tell him you told me. They stared at this bit of humanity who had become so strangely articulate. Francie's voice went ragged with a sob. You don't have to tell him. Besides, it won't do no good. He's a boy and he don't care if he is dirty. She turned, stumbled a little, and walked out of the room. As the door closed, she heard the doctor's surprised voice. I had no idea she'd understand what I was saying. She heard the nurse say, oh well, on a sighing note. Oof, that was brutal, huh? Oh, May is here too? Hey, welcome in, May. All right, let me catch up for a sec. Catching up with your quote, with your chat. Of course, older kids told them that. I was just thinking it was a long shot to think kids that age would make it to the doctors in the first place. Yeah, exactly. Also, welcome in May. The neighbor reminding the kids was a good call. Also, he can shove it. I know. I think they explained that pretty well as to people's attitudes. Yeah, hi, May. What were you doing? Were you streaming yesterday? I think you were, but I missed it. But I've seen your name around for sure. Anyway, welcome in to our cozy stream. Get cozy, relax. I've got this big Japanese bread here that's like 4 times the size of a normal Japanese bread, and it's a cinnamon snowflake. So we're enjoying that. Some tea and some caramel corn. Okay. Yes, poor Francie, these people. Not nice people. But I think they really explain that very well. And again, I started reading this book, not only because it's one of my favorite books of all time, but also, with all of the attitudes about immigrants that are going around lately, I thought it would be very apropos to explore some of that and how far back it goes. And what they just explained was exactly how I look at immigration attitudes, where basically people get in, they get settled, and then they want to pull up the ladder, or close the door behind them. And I think that's pretty lousy, but it is what it is, and it's been going on forever, as long as there's been immigration, Okay. Katie was home for lunch when the children got back. She looked at their bandaged arms with misery in her eyes. Francie spoke out passionately. Why, Mama, why? Why do they have to say things and then stick a needle in your arm? Vaccination, said Mama firmly now that it was all over, is a very good thing. It makes you tell your left hand from your right. You have to write with your right hand when you go to school, and that sore will be there to say, not this hand, use the other hand. This explanation satisfied Francie because she had never been able to tell her left hand from her right. She ate and drew pictures with her left hand. Katie was always correcting her and transferring the chalk or the needle from her left hand to her right. After Mama explained about vaccination, Francie began to think that maybe this was a wonderful thing. It was a small price to pay if it simplified such a great problem and let you know which hand was which. Francie began using her right hand instead of the left after the vaccination and never had trouble afterwards. Francie worked up a fever that night, and the sight of the injection itched painfully. She told Mama, who became greatly alarmed. She gave intense instructions. You're not to scratch it no matter how it bites you. Why can't I scratch it? Because if you do, your whole arm will swell up and turn black and drop right off, so don't scratch it. Katie did not mean to terrify the child. She herself was badly frightened. She believed that blood poisoning would set in if the arm were touched. She wanted to frighten the child into not scratching it. Francie had to concentrate on not scratching the painfully itching area. The next day, shots of pain were shooting up the arm. While preparing for bed, she peered under the bandage. To her horror, the place where the needle had entered was swollen, dark green, and festering yellowly. Sorry, everybody. And Francie had not scratched it. She knew she had not scratched it. But wait, maybe she had scratched it in her sleep the night before. Yes, she must have done it then. She was afraid to tell Mama. Mama would say, I told you, and still you wouldn't listen. Now look. It was Sunday night. Papa was out working. She couldn't sleep. She got up from her cot and went into the front room and sat at the window. She leaned her head on her arms and waited to die. At 3 a.m, she heard a Graham Avenue trolley grind to a stop on the corner. That meant someone was getting off. She leaned out the window. Yes, it was Papa. He sauntered down the street with his light dancer step, whistling, My Sweetheart's the Man in the Moon. The figure in its tuxedo and derby hat, with a rolled-up waiter's apron and a neat packet under its arm, seemed like life itself to Francie. She called to him when he got to the door. He looked up and tipped his hat gallantly. She opened the kitchen door for him. What are you doing up so late, prima donna? He asked. It's not Saturday night, you know. I was sitting at the window, she whispered, waiting for my arm to drop off. He choked back a laugh. She explained about the arm. He closed the door leading into the bedrooms and turned up the gas. He removed the bandage and his stomach turned over at sight of the swollen, festering arm, but he never let her know. Why, baby, that's nothing at all. Just nothing at all. You should have seen my arm when I was vaccinated. It was twice as swollen and red, white, and blue instead of green and yellow, and now look at how hard and strong it is. He lied gallantly, for he had never been vaccinated. He poured warm water into a basin and added a few drops of carbolic acid. He washed the ugly sore over and over again. She winced when it stung, but Johnny said that stinging meant curing. He sang a foolish sentimental song in a whisper as he washed it. He never cares to wander from his own fireside. He never cares to ramble or to roam. He looked around for a clean bit of cloth to serve as a bandage. Finding none, he took off his coat and shirt dicky, pulled his undershirt off over his head, and dramatically ripped a strip of cloth from it. "Your good undershirt," she protested. It was all full of holes anyhow. He bandaged the arm. The cloth smelled of Johnny, warm and cigarish, but it was a comforting thing to the child. It smelled of protection and love. "There, you're all fixed up, prima donna. Whatever gave you the idea your arm was going to drop off?" "Mama said it would if I scratched it. I didn't mean to scratch it, but I guess I did while I was sleeping." "Maybe," he kissed her thin cheek. "Now go back to bed." She went and slept peacefully the rest of the night. In the morning, the throbbing had stopped, and in a few days the arm was normal again. After Francie had gone to bed, Johnny smoked another cigar. Then he undressed slowly and got into Katie's bed. She was sleepily aware of his presence, and in one of her rare impulses of affection, she threw her arm across his chest. He removed it gently and edged as far away from her as he could. He folded his hands under his head and lay staring into the darkness all the rest of that night. Ooh, that kind of had me scared. What about you guys? Not to mention kind of grossed out. All right, is Francie ever going to get to school? The poor girl. Yes, in this chapter, I think she's finally going to get to school. Chapter 19. Francie expected great things from school. Since vaccination taught her instantly the difference between left and right, she thought that school would bring forth even greater miracles. She thought she'd come home from school that first day knowing how to read and write. But all she came home with was a bloody nose gained by an older child slamming her head down on the stone rim of the water trough when she had tried to drink from the faucets that did not gush forth soda water after all. Francie was disappointed because she had to share a seat and desk meant only for one with another girl. She had wanted a desk to herself. She accepted with pride the pencil the monitor passed out to her in the morning and reluctantly surrendered it to another monitor at 3 o'clock. She had been in school but half a day when she knew that she would never be a teacher's pet. That privilege was reserved for a small group of girls. Girls with freshly curled hair, crisp clean pinafores, and new silk hair bows. They were the children of the prosperous storekeepers of the neighborhood. Francie noticed how Miss Briggs, the teacher, beamed on them and seated them in the choicest places in the front row. These darlings were not made to share seats. Miss Briggs's voice was gentle when she spoke to these fortune-favored few, and snarling when she spoke to the great crowd of unwashed. Francie, huddled with the other children of her kind, learned more that first day than she realized. She learned of the class system of a great democracy. She was puzzled and hurt by teachers' attitude. Obviously, the teacher hated her and others like her for no other reason than that they were what they were. Teacher acted as though they had no right to be in the school, but that she was forced to accept them and was doing so with as little grace as possible. She begrudged them the few crumbs of learning she threw at them. Like the doctor at the health center, she too acted as though they had no right to live. It would seem as if all the unwanted children would stick together and be one against the things that were against them. But not so. They hated each other as much as the teacher hated them. They aped teacher's snarling manner when they spoke to each other. There was always one unfortunate whom the teacher singled out and used for a scapegoat. This poor child was the nagged one, the tormented one, the one on whom she vented her spinsterly spleen. I love that phrase. As soon as a child received this dubious recognition, the other children turned on him and duplicated the teacher's torments. Characteristically, they fawned on those close to the teacher's heart. Maybe they figured they were nearer to the throne that way. 3,000 children crowded into this ugly, brutalizing school that had facilities for only 1,000. Dirty stories went the rounds of the children. One of them was that Miss Pfeiffer, a bleached blonde teacher with a high giggle, went down to the basement to sleep with the assistant janitor those times when she put a monitor in charge and explained that she had to, quote, step out to the office. Another, passed around by little boys who had been victims, was that the lady principal, a hard-bitten, heavy, cruel woman of middle years who wore sequin-decorated dresses and smelled always of raw gin, got recalcitrant boys into her office and made them take down their pants so that she could flay their naked buttocks with a rattan cane. She whipped the little girls through their dresses. Of course, corporal punishment was forbidden in the schools, but who outside knew? Who would tell? Not the whipped children, certainly. It was a tradition in the neighborhood that if a child reported that he had been whipped in school, he would receive a second home whipping because he had not behaved in school. So the child took his punishment and kept quiet, leaving well enough alone. The ugliest thing about these stories was that they were all sordidly true. Brutalizing is the only adjective for the public schools of that district around 1908 and 09. Child psychology had not been heard of in Williamsburg in those days. Teaching requirements were easy: graduation from high school and 2 years at teachers' training school. Few teachers had the true vocation for their work. They taught because it was one of the few jobs open to them, because it was better paying than factory work, because they had a long summer vacation, because they got a pension when they retired. They taught because no one wanted to marry them. Married women were not allowed to teach in those days, hence most of the teachers were women made neurotic by starved love instincts. These barren women spent their fury on other women's children in a twisted, authoritative manner. The cruelest teachers were those who had come from homes similar to those of the poor children. It seemed that in their bitterness toward those unfortunate little ones, they were somehow exercising their own fearful background. Of course, not all the teachers were bad. Sometimes one who was sweet came along, one who suffered with the children and tried to help them. But these women did not last long as teachers. Either they married quickly and left a profession, or they were hounded out of their jobs by fellow teachers. The problem of what was delicately called leaving the room was a grim one. The children were instructed to, quote, go before they left home in the morning and then to wait until lunch hour. There was supposed to be a time at recess, but few children were able to take advantage of that. Usually the press of the crowd prevented a child's getting near the washrooms. If he was lucky enough to get there, where there were but 10 lavatories for 500 children, he'd find the places preempted by the 10 most brutalized children in the school. They'd stand in the doorways and prevent entrance to all comers. They were deaf to the piteous pleas of the hordes of tormented children who swarmed before them. A few exacted a fee of a penny, which few children were able to pay. The overlords never relaxed their hold on the swinging doors until the bell clanged at the end of recess. No one ever ascertained what pleasure they derived from this macabre game. They were never punished, since no teacher ever entered the children's washrooms. No child ever snitched. No matter how young he was, he knew that he mustn't squeal. If he tattled, he knew he would be tortured almost to death by the one he reported. So this evil game went on and on. Technically, a child was permitted to leave the room if he asked permission. There was a system of coy evasion. One finger held aloft meant that a child wished to go out but a short time. 2 fingers meant desire for a longer stay. But the harassed and unfeeling teachers assured each other that this was just a subterfuge for a child to get out of the classroom for a little while. They knew the child had ample opportunity at recess and at lunchtime, thus they settled things among themselves. Of course, Francie noted, the favored children, the clean, the dainty, the cared for in the front seats, were allowed to leave at any time. But that was different somehow. As for the rest of the children, half of them learned to adjust their functions to the teacher's ideas of such things, and the other half became chronic pants wetters. Okay, good. I was like, this is getting really depressing, but enter Aunt Sissy. It was Aunt Sissy who fixed up the leaving the room business for Francie. She had not seen the children since Katie and Johnny had told her she was not to visit the house again. She was lonesome for them. She knew they had started school, and she just had to know how they were getting along. It was in November. Work was slack, and Sissy was laid off. She sauntered down the school street, just as school was letting out. If the children reported meeting her, it would seem like an accident, she figured. She saw Neely first in the crowd. A bigger boy snatched his cap off, trampled on it, and ran away. Neely turned to a smaller boy and did the same to his cap. Sissy grabbed Neely's arm, but with a raucous cry, he twisted loose and ran down the street. With poignancy, Sissy realized that he was growing up. Francie saw Sissy and put her arms around her right there on the street and kissed her. Sissy took her into a little candy store and treated her to a penny chocolate soda. Then she made Francie sit down on a stoop and tell her all about school. Francie showed her the primer, I think it's called, and her homework book with block letters in it. Sissy was impressed. She looked long into the child's thin face and noticed that she was shivering. She saw that she was inadequately dressed against the raw November day in a threadbare cotton dress, ragged little sweater, and thin cotton stockings. She put her arm around her and held her close to her own life warmth. "Francie, baby, you're trembling like a leaf." Francie had never heard that expression, and it made her thoughtful. She looked at the little tree growing out of the concrete at the side of the house. There were still a few dried leaves clinging to it. One of them rustled dryly in the wind, trembling like a leaf. She stored the phrase away in her mind, trembling. "What's the matter, Sissy asked. You're ice cold." Francie wouldn't tell at first, but after being coaxed, she buried her shame-hot face in Sissy's neck and whispered something to her. "Oh my," said Sissy, "no wonder you're cold. Why didn't you ask to—" "Teacher never looks at us when we raise our hands." "Oh well, don't worry about it. It could happen to anyone. It happened to the Queen of England when she was a little girl." But had the Queen been so shamed and sensitive about it? Francie wept quietly and rackingly, tears of shame and fear. She was afraid to go home, afraid that Mama would make scornful shame of her. "Your Mama won't scold you. Such an accident could happen to any little girl. Don't say I told you, but your Mama wet her pants when she was little, and your grandma did too. It's nothing new in the world, and you're not the first one it happened to." "But I'm too big. Only babies do that. Mama will make shame on me in front of Neely." "Tell her right out before she finds out for herself, and promise never to do it again. She won't shame you then." "I can't promise because it might happen again, because teacher don't let us go." "From now on, your teacher will let you leave the room anytime you have to. You believe Aunt Sissy, don't you?" "Yes, but how do you know?" "I'll burn a candle in church about it." Francie was consoled with the promise. When Francie went home, Katie did a little routine scolding, but Francie was armored against it in the light of what Sissy had told her about the cycle of wedding. The next morning, 10 minutes before school started, Sissy was in that classroom confronting the teacher. "There's a little girl named Francie Nolan in your room," she started out. "Frances Nolan," corrected Miss Briggs. "Is she smart?" "Yes." "Is she good?" "She had better be." Sissy brought her face closer to Miss Briggs. Her voice went a tone lower and was gentler than before, but for some reason, Miss Briggs backed away. "I just asked you, is she a good girl?" "Yes, she is," said teacher hurriedly. "I happen to be her mother," lied Sissy. "No." "Yes. Anything you want to know about the child's work, Mrs. Nolan?" "Did it ever occur to you," lied Sissy, "that Francie's got kidney trouble?" "Kidney what?" "The doctor said that if she wants to go and some people don't let her go, she's liable to drop right down dead from overloaded kidneys." "Surely you're exaggerating." "How would you like her to drop dead in this room?" "Naturally I wouldn't, but—" "And how would you like her to get a ride to the station house in the how would you like to get a ride to the station house in the pie wagon and stand up in front of this here doctor and the judge and say you wouldn't let her leave the room?" Was Sissy lying? Miss Briggs couldn't tell. It was the most fantastic thing. Yet the woman spoke these sensational things in the calmest, softest voice she had ever heard. At this moment, Sissy happened to look out of the window and saw a burly cop sauntering by. She pointed. "See that cop?" Miss Briggs nodded. "That's my husband." "Frances's father?" "Who else?" Sissy threw open the window and yelled, "Yoo-hoo, Johnny!" The astonished cop looked up. She blew him a great kiss. For a split second, he thought it was some love-starved old maid teacher going crazy. Then his native masculine conceit assured him that it was one of the younger teachers who had long had a crush on him, and she had finally screwed up enough courage to make a passionate overture. He responded to the occasion, blew her a return kiss with a hammy fist, tipped his hat gallantly, and sauntered off down his beat whistling, "At the Devil's Ball." "Sure, I'm a divil amongst the ladies," he thought. "I am that, and me with 6 kids at home." Miss Briggs' eyes bugged out in astonishment. He had been a handsome cop and strong. Just then, one of the little golden girls came in with a beribboned box of candy for teacher. Miss Briggs gurgled with pleasure and kissed the child's satin-pink cheek. Sissy had a mind like a freshly honed razor. In a flash, she saw which way the wind blew. She saw it blue against children like Francie. "Look," she said, "I guess you don't think we got lots of money." "I'm sure I never—" "We're not people that put on. Now Christmas is coming," she bribed. "Maybe," conceded Miss Briggs. "I haven't always seen Frances when she raised her hand." "Where does she sit that you don't see her so good?" Teacher indicated a dark back seat. "Maybe if she sat up front more, you could see her better." "The seating arrangements are all set." Christmas is coming," warned Sissy coyly. "I'll see what I can do." "See then, and see that you see good." Sissy walked to the door, then turned. "Because not only is Christmas coming, but my husband, who is a cop, will come up here and beat hell out of you if you don't treat her right." Francie had no more trouble after that parent-teacher conference. No matter how timorously her hand went up, Miss Briggs happened to see it. She even let her sit in the front row, first seat for a while. But when Christmas came and no expensive Christmas present came with it, Francie was again relegated to the dark back of the room. Neither Francie nor Katie ever learned of Sissy's school visit, but Francie was never shamed again in that way, and if Miss Briggs did not treat her with kindness, at least she didn't nag at her. Of course, Miss Briggs knew that what that woman had told her was ridiculous, yet what was the use of taking chances? She didn't like children, but she was no fiend. She wouldn't want to see a child drop dead before her eyes. A few weeks later, Sissy had one of the girls in her shop write a postcard message for her to Katie. She asked her sister to let bygones be bygones and permit her to come to the house at least to see the children once in a while. Katie ignored the card. Mary Romilly came over to intercede for Sissy. This is the grandmother. "What is there that is bitter between you and your sister?" she asked Katie. "I cannot tell you," replied Katie. "Forgiveness," said Mary Romilly, "is a gift of high value, yet its cost is nothing." "I have my own ways," said Katie. "I," agreed her mother. She sighed deeply and said no more. Katie wouldn't admit it, but she missed Sissy. She missed her reckless good sense and her clear way of straightening out troubles. Yeah, no kidding, huh? Evie never mentioned Sissy when she came to see Katie, and after that one attempt at reconciliation, Mary Romilly never mentioned Sissy's name again. Katie got news of her sister through the official, accredited family reporter, the insurance agent. All of the Romillys were insured by the same company, and the same agent collected the nickels and dimes from each of the sisters weekly. He brought news, carried gossip, and was the round-robin messenger of the family. One day he brought news that Sissy had given birth to another child, which he had been unable to insure since it had lived but 2 hours. Katie felt ashamed of herself at last for being so bitter against poor Sissy. "Next time you see my sister," she told the collector, "tell her not to be such a stranger." The collector relayed the message of forgiveness, and Sissy came back into the Nolan family again. Oh, let me catch up with you guys. It's the end of the chapter. You guys are fighting. You're fighting these people. Yeah, I bet you got to fight their doctor, this kid, this teacher. I'm glad that the author notes that the meanest kids are the most brutalized. It puts the notion of the massively flawed system into perspective. Exactly. You ready for more elementary school brutality? I think there's more to come, but it's still sort of interesting. It's just a really interesting story. Okay. And some things we don't even think about these days, like what we're about to talk about here. Everybody settle back in. Ready? Chapter 20. Katie's campaign against vermin and disease started the day her children entered school. The battle was fierce, brief, and successful. Packed closely together, the children innocently bred vermin and became lousy from each other. Through no fault of their own, they were subjected to the most humiliating procedure that a child could go through. Once a week, the school nurse came and stationed herself with her back to the window. The little girls lined up, and when they came to her, turned around, lifted their heavy braids, and bent over. Nurse probed about the hair with a long, thin stick. If lice or nits were in evidence, the little one was told to stand aside. At the end of the examination, the pariahs were made to stand before the class, while nurse gave a lecture about how filthy those little girls were and how they had to be shunned. The untouchables were then dismissed for the day with instructions to get, quote, blue ointment from Kneipp's drugstore and have their mothers treat their heads. When they returned to school, they were tormented by their peers. Each offender would have an escort of children following her home, chanting, "Lousy, you're lousy. Teacher said you're lousy. Had to go home, had to go home, had to go home 'cause you're lousy." It might be that the infected child would be given a clean bill next examination. In that case, she in turn would torment those found guilty, forgetting her own hurt at being tormented. They learned no compassion from their own anguish, thus their suffering was wasted. There was no room in Katie's crowded life for additional trouble and worry. She wouldn't accept it. The first day that Francie came home from school and reported that she sat next to a girl who had bugs walking up and down the lanes of her hair, Katie went into action. She scrubbed Francie's head with a cake of her coarse, strong yellow scrub woman soap until her scalp tingled with rawness. The next morning, she dipped the hairbrush into a bowl of kerosene oil, brushed Francie's hair vigorously, braided it into braids so tight that the veins on Francie's temple stuck out, instructed her to keep away from lighted gas jets, and sent her off to school. Oh my God, that's so funny. That's so funny. Francie smelled up the whole classroom. Her seat sharer edged as far away from her as possible. Teacher sent a note home forbidding Katie to use kerosene on Francie's head. Katie remarked that it was a free country and ignored the note. Once a week, she scrubbed Francie's head with the yellow soap. Every day, she anointed it with the kerosene. When an epidemic of mumps broke out in the school, Katie went into action against communicable diseases. She made 2 flannel bags, sewed a bud of garlic in each one, attached a clean corset string, and made the children wear them around their necks under their shirts. Francie attended school stinking of garlic and kerosene oil. Everyone avoided her. In the crowded yard, there was always a cleared space around her. In crowded trolley cars, people huddled away from those Nolan children. And it worked. Now, whether there was a witch's charm in the garlic, whether the strong fumes killed the germs, or whether Francie escaped contracting anything because infected children gave her a wide berth, or whether she and Neely had naturally strong constitutions is not known. However, it was a fact that not once in all the years of school were Katie's children ever sick. They never so much as came down with a cold, and they never had lice. Francie, of course, became an outsider, shunned by all because of her stench. But she had become accustomed to being lonely. She was used to walking alone and to being considered different. She did not suffer too much. Yikes, huh? Chapter 21. Francie liked school in spite of all the meanness, cruelty, and unhappiness. The regimented routine of many children, all doing the same thing at once, gave her a feeling of safety. She felt that she was a definite part of something, part of a community gathered under a leader for the one purpose. The Nolans were individualists. They conformed to nothing except what was essential to their being able to live in their world. They followed their own standards of living. They were part of no set social group. This was fine for the making of individualists, but sometimes bewildering to a small child. So Francie felt a certain safety and security in school. Although it was a cruel and ugly routine, it had a purpose and a progression. School was not all unrelieved grimness. There was a great golden glory lasting a half hour each week when Mr. Morton came to Francie's room to teach music. He was a specialized teacher who went around to all of the schools in that area. It was holiday time when he appeared. He wore a swallow-tailed coat and a puffed-up tie. He was so vibrant, gay, and jolly, so intoxicated with living, that he was like a god come from the clouds. He was homely in a gallant, vital way. He understood and loved children, and they worshipped him. The teachers adored him. There was a carnival spirit in the room on the day of his visit. Teacher wore her best dress and wasn't quite so mean. Sometimes she curled her hair and wore perfume. That's what Mr. Morton did to those ladies. He arrived like a tornado. The door burst open and he flew in with his coattails streaming behind him. He leaped to the platform and looked around, smiling and saying, "Well, well," in a happy voice. The children sat there and laughed out of happiness, and teacher smiled and smiled. He drew notes on the blackboard. He drew little legs on them to make them look as though they were running out of the scale. He'd make a flat note look like Humpty Dumpty. A sharp note would rate a thin beak-like nose zooming off it. All the while he'd burst into singing just as spontaneously as a bird. Sometimes his happiness was so overflowing that he couldn't hold it in, and he'd cut a dance caper to spill some of it out. He taught them good music without letting them know it was good. He said his own words to the great classics and gave them simple names like lullaby and serenade and street song and song for a sunshiny day. Their baby voices shrilled out in Handel's Largo, and they knew it merely by the title of hymn. Little boys whistled part of Dvorak's New World Symphony as they played marbles. When asked the name of the song, they'd reply, "Oh, Going Home." They played Potsy humming the Soldier's Chorus from Faust, which they called Glory. Not as well loved as Mr. Morton, but as much admired was Miss Burnstone, the special drawing teacher who also came once a week. Oh, she was from another world, a world of beautiful dresses of muted greens and garnets. Her face was sweet and tender, and like Mr. Morton, she loved the vast hordes of unwashed and unwanted children more than she loved the cared-for ones. The teachers did not like her. Yes, they fawned on her when she spoke to them, and glowered at her when her back was turned. They were jealous of her charm, her sweetness, and her lovely appeal to men. She was warm and glowing and richly feminine. They knew that she didn't sleep alone nights as they were forced to do. She spoke softly in a clear singing voice. Her hands were beautiful and quick with a bit of chalk or a stick of charcoal. There was magic in the way her wrist turned when she held a crayon. One wrist twist and there was an apple. Two more twists and there was a child's sweet hand holding the apple. On a rainy day, she wouldn't give a lesson. She'd take a block of paper and a stick of charcoal and sketch the poorest, meanest kid in the room. And when the picture was finished, you didn't see the dirt or the meanness. You saw the glory of innocence and the poignancy of a baby growing up too soon. Oh, Miss Burnstone was grand. These two visiting teachers were the gold and silver sunsplash in the great muddy river of school days. Days made up of dreary hours in which teacher made her pupils sit rigid with their hands folded behind their backs while she read a novel hidden in her lap. If all the teachers had been like Miss Burnstone and Mr. Morton, Francie would have known plain what heaven was. But it was just as well. There had to be the dark and muddy waters so that the sun could have something to background its flashing glory. Well, that's really nice. Chapter 22. Oh, magic hour when a child first knows it can read printed words. For quite a while, Francie had been spelling out letters, sounding them, and then putting the sounds together to mean a word. But one day she looked at a page, and the word mouse had instantaneous meaning. She looked at the word, and the picture of a gray mouse scampered through her mind. She looked further, and when she saw horse, she heard him pawing the ground and saw the sun glint on his glossy coat. The word running hit her suddenly, and she breathed hard as though running herself. The barrier between the individual sound of each letter and the whole meaning of the word was removed, and the printed word meant a thing at one quick glance. She read a few pages rapidly and almost became ill with excitement. She wanted to shout it out. She could read! She could read! From that time on, the world was hers for the reading. She would never be lonely again, never miss the lack of intimate friends. Books became her friends, and there was one for every mood. There was poetry for quiet companionship. There was adventure when she tired of quiet hours. There would be love stories when she came into adolescence, and when she wanted to feel a closeness to someone, she could read a biography. On that day when she first knew she could read, she made a vow to read one book a day as long as she lived. That's a lot. She liked numbers and sums. She devised a game in which each number was a family member, and the answer made a family grouping with a story to it. Naught was a babe in arms. He gave no trouble. Whenever he appeared, you just carried him. The figure 1 was a pretty baby girl just learning to walk and easy to handle. 2 was a baby boy who could walk and talk a little. He went into family life, into Psalms, etc., with very little trouble. And 3 was an older boy in kindergarten who had to be watched a little. Then there was 4, a girl of Francie's age. She was almost as easy to mind as 2. The mother was 5, gentle and kind. In large sums, she came along and made everything easy the way a mother should. The father, 6, was harder than the others, but very just. But 7 was mean. He was a crotchety old grandfather and not at all accountable for how he came out. The grandmother, 8, was hard too, but easier to understand than 7. Hardest of all was 9. He was company, and what a hard time fitting him into family life. When Francie added a sum, she would fix a little story to go with the result. If the answer was 924, it meant that the little boy and girl were being minded by company whilst the rest of the family went out. When a number such as 1024 appeared, it meant that all the little children were playing together in the yard. Number 62 meant that Papa was taking the little boy for a walk. 50 meant that Mama had the baby out in the buggy for an airing, and 78 meant grandfather and grandmother sitting home by the fire of a winter's evening. Each single combination of numbers was a new setup for the family, and no 2 stories were ever the same. Francie took the game with her up into algebra. X was the boy's sweetheart who came into the family life and complicated it. Y was the boyfriend who caused trouble. So arithmetic was a warm and human thing to Francie and occupied many lonely hours of her time. I mean, that's fascinating. What an interesting idea. Chapter 23. School days went along. Some were made up of meanness, brutality, and heartbreak. Others were bright and beautiful because of Miss Burnstone and Mr. Morton. And always there was the magic of learning things. Francie was out walking one Saturday in October, and she chanced on an unfamiliar neighborhood. Here were no tenements or raucous, shabby stores. There were old houses that had been standing there when Washington maneuvered his troops across Long Island. They were old and decrepit, but there were picket fences around them with gates on which Francie longed to swing. There were bright fall flowers in the front yard and maple trees with crimson and yellow leaves on the curb. The neighborhood stood old, quiet, and serene in the Saturday sunshine. There was a brooding quality about the neighborhood, a quiet, deep, timeless, shabby peace. Francie was as happy as though, like Alice, she had stepped through a magic mirror. She was in an enchanted land. She walked on further and came to a little old school. Its old bricks glowed garnet in the late afternoon sun. There was no fence around the schoolyard, and the school grounds were grass and not cement. Across from the school, it was practically open country, a meadow with goldenrod, wild asters, and clover growing in it. Francie's heart turned over. This was it. This was the school she wanted to go to. But how could she get to go there? There was a strict law about attending the school in your own district. Her parents would have to move to that neighborhood if she wanted to go to that school. Francie knew that Mama wouldn't move just because she felt like going to another school. She walked home slowly, thinking about it. She sat up that night waiting for Papa to come home from work. After Johnny had come home whistling his Molly Malone as he ran up the steps, after all had eaten of the lobster caviar and liverwurst that he brought home, Mama and Neely went to bed. Francie kept Papa company while he smoked his last cigar. Francie whispered all about the school in Papa's ear. He looked at her, nodded, and said, "We'll see tomorrow." "You mean we can move near the school?" No, but there has to be another way. I'll go there with you tomorrow, and we'll see what we can see." Francie was so excited she couldn't sleep the rest of the night. She was up at 7, but Johnny was still sleeping soundly. She waited in a perspiration of impatience. Each time he sighed in his sleep, she ran in to see if he was waking up. He woke about noon, and the Nolans sat down to dinner. Francie couldn't eat. She kept looking at Papa, but he made her no sign. Had he forgotten? Had he forgotten? No, because while Katie was pouring the coffee, he said carelessly, "I guess me and the prima donna will take a little walk later on." Francie's heart jumped. He had not forgotten. He had not forgotten. She waited. Mama had no answer. Mama might object. Mama might ask why. Mama might say she guessed she'd go along too, but all Mama said was, "All right." Francie did the dishes, then she had to go down to the candy store to get the Sunday paper, then to the cigar store to get Papa a nickel Corona. Johnny had to read the paper. He had to read every column of it, including the society section in which he couldn't possibly be interested. Worse than that, he had to make comments to Mama on every item he read. Each time he'd put the paper aside, turn to Mama and say, "Funny things in the paper nowadays. Take this case." Francie would almost cry. 4 o'clock came. The cigar had long since been smoked. The paper lay gutted on the floor. Katie had tired of having the news analyzed and had taken Neely and gone over to visit Mary Romilly. Francie and Papa set out hand in hand. He was wearing his only suit, the tuxedo, and his derby hat, and he looked very grand. It was a splendid October day. There was a warm sun and a refreshing wind working together to bring the tang of the ocean around each corner. They walked a few blocks, turned a corner, and were in this other neighborhood. Only in a great sprawling place like Brooklyn could there be such a sharp division. It was a neighborhood peopled by fifth and sixth generation Americans, whereas in the Nolan neighborhood, if you could prove you had been born in America, it was equivalent to a Mayflower standing. Indeed, Francie was the only one in her classroom whose parents were American-born. At the beginning of the term, teacher called the roll and asked each child her lineage. The answers were typical. I'm Polish-American. My father was born in Warsaw. Irish-American. Me father and mither were born in County Cork. When Nolan was called, Francie answered proudly, I'm an American. I know you're American, said the easily exasperated teacher, but what's your nationality? American, insisted Francie even more proudly. Will you tell me what your parents are, or do I have to send you to the principal? My parents are American. They were born in Brooklyn. All the children turned around to look at a little girl whose parents had not come from the old country. And when teacher said, Brooklyn? I guess that makes you American, all right. Francie was proud and happy. How wonderful was Brooklyn, she thought, when just being born there automatically made you an American. Oh, hey, welcome in, Tea Light Trees. Let's take a quick break and do your tea pets redeem, because it looks like the chapter won't be over for a little while. Yeah. So our tea pet today is sitting in a puddle already, but I'll dump that off if I can gently drain that off a little bit. How are you doing today? Hope you're well. Let me push the book aside a little bit. So yeah, this is our tea pet. He's a baby Pichu, which is kind of like a lion dog. Very sleepy. He'll be listening as a bedtime story. Well, we've had some like very traumatic parts of this story so far, but I won't yell, so it should work. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Thank you for being here. This tea in my cup has gotten pretty cold, so I'll go ahead and give this to our tea pet. He's kind of large as far as my tea pets go. He's on the larger side, but as far as, typical Chinese tea pets, he's a pretty small one. Okay, and then we have this much tea left. Let me have one more cracker. These are scallion biscuits, and they are very crunchy. Okay. Okay, so we're back to the strange neighborhood. Oh, thank you, Tea Light Trees. I'm glad you like the calm atmosphere. I mean, 90% of it is the Johnny Bailey music. The Fox and the Girl is also Johnny Bailey, by the way. I mean, I credit the music for being, a really big part of it. I am kind of enjoying also staring at some of these wax seals that I've made in between reading. This is, I think, my favorite one on the table. It was made with that stick wax, those wax, sealing wax sticks. They're just like super pigmented. So I'll bring that one over here where we can see it better. It's kind of fun having those around. Okay, so, yes, Francie and Papa, Johnny, are exploring it's a new neighborhood to her. Papa told her about this strange neighborhood, how its families had been Americans for more than 100 years back, how they were mostly Scotch, English, and Welsh extraction. The men worked as cabinet makers and fine carpenters. They worked with metals, gold, silver, and copper. He promised to take Francie to the Spanish section of Brooklyn someday. There, the men worked as cigar makers, and each chipped in a few pennies a day to hire a man to read to them while they worked. And the man read fine literature. They walked along the quiet Sunday street. Francie saw a leaf flutter from a tree, and she skipped ahead to get it. It was a clear scarlet with an edging of gold. She stared at it, wondering if she'd ever see anything as beautiful again. A woman came from around the corner. She was rouged heavily and wore a feather boa. She smiled at Johnny and said, "Lonesome, mister?" Johnny looked at her a moment before he answered gently, "No, sister." "Sure?" she inquired archly. "Sure," he answered quietly. She went her way. Francie skipped back and took Papa's hand. "Was that a bad lady, Papa?" she asked eagerly. "No." "But she looked bad." "There are very few bad people. There are just a lot of people that are unlucky. But she was all painted, and she was one who had seen better days." He liked the phrase. Yes, she may have seen better days. He fell into a thoughtful mood. Francie kept skipping ahead and collecting leaves. They came upon the school, and Francie proudly showed it to Papa. The late afternoon sun warmed its softly colored bricks, and the small pane windows seemed to dance in the sunshine. Johnny looked at it a long time, and then he said, "Yes, this is the school. Yes, this is it." Then, as whenever he was moved or stirred, he had to put it into a song. He held his worn derby over his heart, stood up straight looking at the schoolhouse, and sang, I'm not going to sing this. School days, dear old golden rule days, readin' and writin' and arithmetic. To a passing stranger, it might have looked silly. Johnny standing there in his greenish tuxedo and fresh linen, holding the hand of a thin, ragged child, and singing the banal song so self-consciously on the street. But to Francie, it seemed right and beautiful. They crossed the street and wandered in the meadow that folks called lots. Francie picked a bunch of goldenrod and wild asters to take home. Johnny explained that the place had once been an Indian burying ground, and how as a boy he had often come there to hunt arrowheads. Francie suggested they hunt for some. They searched for half an hour and found none. Johnny recalled that as a boy he hadn't found any either. This struck Francie as funny, and she laughed. Papa confessed that maybe it hadn't been an Indian cemetery after all. Maybe someone had made up that story. Johnny was more than right, because he had made up the whole story himself. Soon it was time to go home, and tears came into Francie's eyes because Papa hadn't said anything about getting her into the new school. He saw the tears and figured out a scheme immediately. "Tell you what we'll do, baby. We'll walk around and pick out a nice house and take down the number. I'll write a letter to your principal saying you're moving there and want to be transferred to this school." They found a house, a one-story white one with a slanting roof and late chrysanthemums growing in the yard. He copied the address carefully. "You know that what we are going to do is wrong?" "Is it, Papa?" "But it's a wrong to gain a bigger good." "Like a white lie?" "Like a lie that helps someone out. So you must make up for the wrong by being twice as good. You must never be bad or absent or late. You must never do anything to make them send a letter home through the mails." "I'll always be good, Papa, if I can go to that school." "Yes. Now I'll show you a way to go to school through a little park. I know right where it is. Yes, sir, I know right where it is." He showed her the park and how she could walk through it diagonally to go to school. "That should make you happy. You can see the seasons change as you come and go. What do you say to that?" Francie, recalling something her mother had once read to her, and answered, "My cup runneth over," and she meant it. When Katie heard of the plan, she said, "Suit yourself, but I'll have nothing to do with it. If the police come in and arrest you for giving a false address, I'll say honestly that I had nothing to do with it. One school's as good or bad as another. I don't know why she wants to change. There's homework no matter what school you go to." "It's settled then," Johnny said. "Francie, here's a penny. Run down to the candy store and get a sheet of writing paper and an envelope." Francie ran down and back. Johnny wrote a note saying Francie was going to live with relatives at such and such an address and wanted a transfer. He added that Neely would continue living at home and wouldn't require a transfer. He signed his name and underlined it authoritatively. Tremblingly, Francie handed the note to her principal next morning. The lady read it, grunted, made out the transfer, handed her her report card, and told her to go, that the school was too crowded anyhow. Francie presented herself and documents to the principal of the new school. He shook hands with her and said he'd hoped she'd be happy in the new school. A monitor took her to the classroom. The teacher stopped the work and introduced Francie to the class. Francie looked out over the rows of little girls. All were shabby, but most were clean. She was given a seat to herself and happily fell into the routine of the new school. The teachers and children here were not as brutalized as in the old school. Yes, some of the children were mean, but it seemed a natural child meanness and not a campaign. Often the teachers were impatient and cross, but never naggingly cruel. There was no corporal punishment either. The parents were too American, too aware of the rights granted them by their Constitution to accept injustices meekly. They could not be bulldozed and exploited as could the immigrants and the second-generation Americans. Francie found that the different feeling in this school came mostly from the janitor. He was a ruddy, white-haired man whom even the principal addressed as Mr. Jensen. He had many children and grandchildren of his own, all of whom he loved dearly. He was father to all children. On rainy days when children came to school soaked, he insisted that they be sent down to the furnace room to dry out. He made them take off their wet shoes and hung their wet stockings on a line to dry. The little shabby shoes stood in a row before the furnace. It was pleasant down in the furnace room. The walls were whitewashed and the big red painted furnace was a comforting thing. The windows were high up in the walls. Francie liked to sit there and enjoy the warmth and watch the orange and blue flames dancing an inch above the bed of small black coals. He left the furnace door open when the children were drying out. On rainy days, she left earlier and walked to school slower so that she would be soaking wet and rate the privilege of drying in the furnace room. It was unorthodox for Mr. Jensen to keep the children out of class to dry, but everyone liked and respected him too much to protest. Francie heard stories around the school concerning Mr. Jensen. She heard that he had been to college and knew more than the principal did. They said he had married and when the children came had decided that there was more money in being a school engineer than in being a school teacher. I'm going to show you the picture up close. This is Mr. Jensen in the furnace room. And you got some stockings and a sweater hanging on a pipe to dry. I love that desk. I had a desk very much like that a while ago. This was years ago on the mainland. It was antique roll-top desk like that. Pretty cool. Okay, moving on. Whatever it was, he was liked and respected. Once Francie saw him in the principal's office. He was in his clean striped overalls sitting there with his knees crossed and talking politics. Francie heard that the principal often came down to Mr. Jensen's furnace room to sit and talk for a few moments while he smoked a pipe full of tobacco. When a boy was bad, he wasn't sent to the principal's office for a licking. He was sent down to Mr. Jensen's room for a talking to. Mr. Jensen never scolded a bad boy. He talked to him about his own youngest son, who was a pitcher on the Dodgers team. He talked about democracy and good citizenship, and about a good world where everyone did the best he could for the common good of all. After a talk with Mr. Jensen, the boy could be counted upon not to cause any more trouble. At graduation, the children asked the principal to sign the first page of their autograph book out of respect to his position. But they valued Mr. Jensen's autograph more, and he always got the second page to sign. The principal signed quickly in a great sprawling hand, but not Mr. Jensen. He made a ceremony out of it. He took the book over to his big roll-top desk and lit the light over it. He sat down, carefully polished his spectacles, and chose a pen. He dipped it in ink, squinted at it, wiped it off, and re-dipped it. Then he signed his name in a fine steel engraving script and blotted it carefully. His signature was always the finest in the book. If you had the nerve to ask him, he'd take the book home and ask his son, who was with the Dodgers, to sign it too. This was a wonderful thing for the boys. The girls didn't care. Mr. Jensen's handwriting was so wonderful that he wrote out all the diplomas by request. Mr. Morton and Miss Burnstone came to that school too. When they were teaching, Mr. Jensen would often come in and squeeze himself into one of the back seats and enjoy the lesson too. On a cold day, he'd have Mr. Morton or Miss Burnstone come down to his furnace room for a hot cup of coffee before they went on to the next school. He had a gas plate and coffee-making equipment on a little table. He served strong, hot black coffee in thick cups, and these visiting teachers blessed his good soul. Francie was happy at this school. She was very careful about being a good girl. Each day as she passed the house whose number she claimed, she looked at it with gratitude and affection. On windy days when papers blew before it, she went about picking up the debris and depositing it in the gutter before the house. Mornings after the rubbish man had emptied the burlap bag and had carelessly tossed the empty bag on the walk instead of in the yard, Francie picked it up and hung it on a fence paling. The people who lived in the house came to look on her as a quiet child who had a queer complex about tidiness. That's so cute. Francie loved that school. It meant that she had to walk 48 blocks each day, but she loved the walk too. That's a long ways. She had to leave earlier in the morning than Neely, and she got home much later. She didn't mind, except that it was a little hard at lunchtime. There were 12 blocks to come home and 12 to go back, all in the hour. It left little time for eating. Mama wouldn't let her carry a lunch. Her reason was, she'll be weaned away from her home and family soon enough the way she's growing up. But while she's still a child, she has to act like a child and come home and eat the way children should. Is it my fault that she has to go so far to school? Didn't she pick it out herself? But Katie, argued Papa, it's such a good school. Then let her take the bad along with this good. The lunch question was settled. Francie had about 5 minutes for lunch, just enough time to report home for a sandwich, which she ate walking back to school. She never considered herself put upon. She was so happy in the new school that she was anxious to pay in some way for this joy. It was a good thing that she got herself into this other school. It showed her that there were other worlds besides the world she had been born into, and that these other worlds were not unattainable. Wow. So good. Okay, I'm just going to see how much more is in... I don't know if we can finish book 3 today because it seems to be longer than book 2. But in any case, let's make some more tea and have another little bit of popcorn. It's still sort of crunchy. Yeah, it's long. I don't think we're going to make it through book 3. I'm just paging forward to see how much there is. Like the little illustration, yeah, the chapters. It's got the tree. I still don't know what kind of tree this is. Oh, it's the window. It's also the fire escape railing. Is that? Okay, I do not know where book 3 ends. So clearly it's there's a lot. Yeah, I'm paged all the way up to chapter 39, and it's still not showing that it's, book 4 yet. So I guess we won't be able to go by that going forward. Okay, book 4 starts on page 299. So we are definitely not going to get there today. Are you guys enjoying this story? I know that there's some tough parts of it. I could probably read like another, probably about an hour. I hope you're okay with the crunching. Okay, let's just see how we do for the next hour. Obviously, got to make some more tea. That's a total given. I do feel like, here, let me put this aside. I do feel like I need to add a few more leaves, that this was not a tea that, is designed to be steeped many, many, many times, as I have. So it's losing a little bit of its flavor. So I'm going to just, rather than like dumping it and starting all over, I'm just going to add, a few extra fresh leaves here, just to zhuzh it up a little bit. It's a very twisty tea, isn't it? Twisty and somehow crinkled at the same time. It does make me wonder, like, how they processed it. Usually the tea is like rolled, so to make the shape, rolled on a machine. But rolling isn't like when you think of as rolling like a rolling pin, like flattened. It's like rolling goes like this. And I think it depends on like how tightly you roll it, what the shape comes out. Or how close together or how far apart the rolling plates are. And then some of them have grooves in them, to make, I think that's how some of the oolong tea is also made into balls. It's a really interesting story. Some stuff is really tough, but it's such a good glimpse into what that life was like. Yeah, I guess we kind of got you hooked by talking about the kind of food they ate and stuff like that. I always thought that was like a really interesting part of the story was, how the kids would go down and get stale bread and all the things they made out of it. Okay, so cleaning off the foam real quick. I'm just gonna wipe that off on the tea towel. Okay. Oop, that looks like much richer already. And then frankly, this amount of leaf is probably more like what you would put in a gaiwan. It's like basically the leaves almost fill it up and there's enough room for a little bit of water. So let's go ahead and pour that out right now. Oh, I know you heard that. The microphone's pointing right at it. You can't really see it, but the microphone is like right here above the pitcher. Okay. And maybe I'll grab a couple of more crackers before we go on. Thanks for your patience with all of my snacking. That is what we do here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I never saw the movie. But you know what movie I did see right after we discussed it was The Tin Men. Remember Tin Men? About the aluminum siding salesman? We did like watch that the same night. That is not at all what I don't think my dad was like that at all. So I was talking about how that was the business he was in and the exact year that he was in that business. That is not what he was doing. That is a crazy movie about two siding salesmen that basically get into a feud and keep crashing into each other's cars and just weird, crazy stuff. No. That is not what he was doing. They were in, and they were also like really scamming people. Oh, that is so good when it's hot. Okay. Chapter 24. Francie counted the years passing, not by the days or the months, but by the holidays that came along. Her years started with the 4th of July because it was the first holiday that came along after school closed. A week before the day, she began accumulating firecrackers. Every available penny went for packets of small crackers. She hoarded them in a box under the bed. At least 10 times a day, she'd take the box out, rearrange the fireworks, and look long at the pale red tissue and white corded stem and wonder about how they were made. She smelled the thick bit of punk which was given gratis with each purchase, and which, when lit, smoldered for hours and was used to set off the firecrackers. When the great day came, she was reluctant to set them off. It was better to have them than to use them. One year, when times were harder than usual, and pennies could not be had, Francie and Neely hoarded paper bags and on the day filled them with water, twisted the tops shut, and dropped them from the roof onto the street below. They made a nice plop, which was almost like a firecracker. Passers-by were irritated and looked up angrily when a bag just missed them, but they did nothing about it, accepting the fact that poor children had a custom of celebrating the 4th that way. The next holiday was Halloween. Neely blackened his face with soot, wore his cap backwards and his coat inside out. He filled one of his mother's long black stockings with ashes and roamed the streets with his gang, swinging his homely blackjack and crying out raucously from time to time. Francie, in company with the other little girls, roamed the streets carrying a bit of white chalk. She went about drawing a large quick cross on the back of each coated figure that came by. The children performed the ritual without meaning. The symbol was remembered, but the reason forgotten. It may have been something that had survived from the Middle Ages, when houses and probably individuals were so marked to indicate where plague had struck. Probably the ruffians of that time so marked innocent people as a cruel joke, and the practice had persisted down through the centuries to be distorted into a meaningless Halloween prank. Election Day seemed the greatest holiday of all to Francie. It, more than any other time, belonged to the whole neighborhood. Maybe people voted in other parts of the country too, but it couldn't be the way it was in Brooklyn, thought Francie. Johnny showed Francie an oyster house on Skull Street. It was housed in a building that had been standing there more than 100 years before, when Big Chief Tammany himself skulked around with his braves. Its oyster fries were known throughout the state, but there was something else that made this place famous. It was the secret meeting place of the great city hall politicians. The party sachems met here in secret powwow in a private dining room, and over succulent oysters they decided who'd be elected and who mowed down. Ooh, the original backroom deal. Francie often passed by the store, looked at it, and was thrilled. It had no name over its door, and its window was empty save for a potted fern and a half curtain of brown linen run on brass rods along the back of it. Once Francie saw the door open to admit someone. She had a glimpse of a low room dimly lit with dulled red-shaded lamps and thick with the smoke of cigars. Francie, along with the other neighborhood children, went through some of the election rites without knowing their meaning or reason. On election night, she got in line, her hands on the shoulders of the child in front, and snake danced through the street singing, "Tammany, Tammany, Big Chief sits in his teepee, cheering braves to victory. Tammany, Tammany." She was an interested listener at the debates between Mama and Papa on the merits and faults of the party. Papa was an ardent Democrat, but Mama just didn't care. Mama criticized the party and told Johnny he was throwing his vote away. "Don't say that, Katie," he protested. "By and large, the party does a lot of good for the people." "I can just imagine," sniffed Mama. "All they want is a vote from the man of the family, and look what they give in exchange." "Name one thing they give." "Well, you need advice on a legal matter. You don't need a lawyer. Just ask your assemblyman." "The blind leading the blind." "Don't you believe it? They may be dumb in many ways, but they know the city's statutes backward and forward." "Sue the city for something and see how far Tammany will help you." "Take civil service," said Johnny, starting from another angle. "They know when the examinations for cops, firemen, or letter carriers are coming up. They'll always put a voter wise if he's interested." "Mrs. Levy's husband took the examination for letter carrier 3 years ago. He's still working on a truck." "Ah, that's because he's a Republican. If he was a Democrat, they'd take his name and put it on the top of the list. I heard about a teacher who wanted to be transferred to another school. Tammany fixed it up." "Why? Why? Unless she was pretty." "That's not the point. It was a shrewd move. Teachers are educating future voters. This teacher, for instance, will always say a good word for Tammany to her pupils whenever she can. Every boy has to grow up to vote, you know." "Why?" "Because it's a privilege." "Privilege? Humph," sneered Katie. "Now, for instance, if you had a poodle and it died, what would you do?" "What would I do with a poodle in the first place?" "Can't you make out like you have a dead poodle just for the sake of conversation?" "All right, my poodle's dead. Now what?" "You go around to headquarters, and the boys will take it away for you. Suppose Francie wanted to get working papers but was too young." "They'd get them, I suppose." "Certainly. Do you think that's right to fix it so little children can work in factories?" "Well, supposing you had a bad boy who played hooky from school and was getting to be a loafer hanging around street corners, but the law wouldn't let him work. Wouldn't it be better if he got fake working papers?" "In that case, yes," conceded Katie. "Look at all the jobs they get for voters." "You know how they get them, don't you? They inspect a factory and overlook the fact that they're violating the factory laws. Naturally, the boss pays back by letting them know when they need men, and Tammany gets all the credit for finding jobs. Here's another case. A man has relatives in the old country, but he can't get them over here on account of the quotas. Well, Tammany can fix that up. Sure, they get them foreigners over here and see to it that they start in on their citizenship papers, and then tell them they must vote the Democratic ticket or go back where they came from. No matter what you say, Tammany's good to the poor people. Say a man's been sick and can't pay his rent. Do you think the organization would let the landlord dispossess him? No, sir. Not if he's a Democrat. I suppose the landlords are all Republicans then, Katie said. No, the system works both ways. Suppose the landlord has a bum for a tenant who gives him a punch in the nose instead of the rent. What happens? The organization dispossesses him for the landlord. For what Tammany gives to the people, it takes from them double. You wait until us women vote. Johnny's laugh interrupted her. You don't believe we will? That day will come. Mark my words. We'll put all those crooked politicians where they belong, behind iron bars. If that day ever comes when women vote, you'll go along to the polls with me, arm in arm, and vote the way I do. He put his arm around her and gave her a quick hug. Katie smiled up at him. Francie couldn't help noticing that Mama was smiling sidewise, the way the lady did in the picture in the school auditorium, the one they called Mona Lisa. Well, that was pretty funny. She's like, sure, I'll vote the same as you. Tammany owed much of its power to the fact that it got the children young and educated them. It got the children young and educated them in the party ways. The dumbest ward healer was smart enough to know that time, no matter what else it did, passed, and that the schoolboy of today was the voter of tomorrow. They got the boys on their side and the girls too. A woman couldn't vote in those days, but the politicians knew that the women of Brooklyn had a great influence on their men. Bring a little girl up in the party way, and when she married, she'd see to it that her man voted the straight Democratic ticket. To woo the children, the Mattie Mahoney Association ran an excursion for them and their parents each summer. Although Katie had nothing but contempt for the organization, she saw no reason why they shouldn't take advantage of the good time. When Francie heard that they were going, she was excited as only a 10-year-old who had never been on a boat before could be. Johnny refused to go and couldn't see why Katie wanted to go. "I'm going because I like life," was her strange reason. "If that racket's life, I wouldn't take it with coupons," he said. But he went anyhow. He figured the boat trip might be educational, and he wanted to be on hand to educate the children. It was a hot, sweltering day. Excuse me. The decks teemed with kids, wild with excitement, racing up and down and trying to fall into the Hudson River. Francie stared and stared at the moving water until she worked up the first headache of her life. Johnny told his children how Hendrik Hudson had sailed up that same river so long ago. Francie wondered whether Mr. Hudson got sick to his stomach like she did. Mama sat on deck looking very pretty in her jade green straw hat and yellow dotted Swiss dress that she had borrowed from Aunt Evie. People around her were laughing. Mama was a vivid conversationalist, and people liked to hear her talk. Soon after noon, a boat docked at a wooded glen upstate, and the Democrats got off the boat and took over. The kids ran around spending their tickets. The week before, each child had been given a strip of 10 tickets labeled hot dog, soda water, merry-go-round, and so on. Francie and Neely had each been given a strip, but Francie had been tempted by some shrewd boys into gambling her tickets in a marble game. They had told her how she might possibly win 50 strips and have a grand day on the excursion. Francie was a poor marble player and quickly lost her tickets. Neely, on the other hand, had 3 strips. He had been lucky. Francie asked Mama could she have one of Neely's tickets. Mama seized the opportunity to give her a lecture on gambling. "You had tickets, but you thought you could be smart and get something you weren't entitled to." Sorry, I got lost here. "When people gamble, they think only of winning. They never think of losing. Remember this. Someone has to lose, and it's just as apt to be you as the other fellow. If you learn this lesson by giving up a strip of tickets, you're paying cheap for the education." Mama was right. Francie knew she was right, but it didn't make her happy at all. She wanted to go on the merry-go-round like the other kids. She wanted a drink of soda. She was standing disconsolately near the hot dog stand watching other children stuff themselves when a man paused to speak to her. He wore a policeman's uniform, only with more gold on it. "No tickets, little girl?" he asked. "I forgot them," lied Francie. "Sure, and I was no good at marbles meself as a boy." He pulled 3 strips from his pocket. "We count on making up a certain number of losses each year, but it's seldom the girls are the losing ones. They hang on to what they have, be it ever so little." Francie took the tickets, thanked him, and was backing off when he asked, "Would that be your mother sitting over there in the green hat?" "Yes." She waited. He said nothing. Finally, she asked, "Why?" "Do you be saying your prayers to the little flower each night asking that you grow up half as pretty as your mother? Do that now." "And that's my papa next to my mama." Francie waited to hear him say that Papa was good looking too. He stared at Johnny and said nothing. Francie ran off. Francie was instructed to report back to her mother at half-hour intervals during the day. At the next interval, when Francie came back, Johnny was over at the free beer keg. Mama teased her. "You're like Aunt Sissy, always talking to men in uniform." "He gave me extra tickets." "I saw." Katie's next words were casual enough. "What did he ask you?" "He asked, was you my mama?" Francie did not tell her what he said about Mama being pretty. "Yes, I thought he was asking that." Katie stared at her hands. They were rough and red and cut into with cleansing fluids. She took a pair of mended cotton gloves from her purse. Although it was a hot day, she pulled them on. She sighed. "I work so hard, sometimes I forget that I'm a woman." Francie was startled. It was the nearest thing to a complaint she had ever heard from Mama. She wondered why Mama was ashamed of her hands all of a sudden. As she skipped away, she heard Mama ask the lady next to her, "Who's that man over there, the one in uniform, looking this way?" That would be Sergeant Michael McShane. It's funny how you don't know who he is, seeing that it's from your own precinct he is. The day of joy went on. There was a keg of beer set up at the end of each long table, and it was free to all good Democrats. Francie was caught up in the excitement and tore around, screamed, and fought like the other children. Beer flowed like a Brooklyn gutter after a rainstorm. A brass band played doggedly. It played The Kerry Dancers and When Irish Eyes Are Smiling and Harrigan, That's Me. It played the River Shannon and New York's own folk song, The Sidewalks of New York. The conductor announced each selection. Matty Mahoney's band will now play. Each song ended with the band members shouting in unison, "Hooray for Matty Mahoney." With each glass of beer drawn, the attendant said, "Compliments of Matty Mahoney." Each event was labeled the Matty Mahoney Foot Race, the Matty Mahoney Peanut Race, and so on. Before the day was over, Francie was convinced that Matty Mahoney was a very great man indeed. Late in the afternoon, Francie got the idea that she ought to find Mr. Mahoney and thank him personally for a very nice time. She searched, and asked, and a strange thing happened. No one knew Matty Mahoney. No one had ever seen him. Certainly he was not at the picnic. His presence was felt everywhere, but the man was invisible. Some man told her that maybe there was no Matty Mahoney. It was just the name they gave to whatever man was head of the organization. "I've been voting the straight ticket for 40 years, he said. Seems like the candidate was always the same man, Matty Mahoney. Or else it was a different man, but with the same name. I don't know who he is, girlie. All I know is that I vote the straight Democratic ticket." The trip home down the moonlit Hudson was notable only for the many fights that broke out amongst the men. Most of the children were sick and sunburned and fretful. Neely fell asleep on Mama's lap. Francie sat on the deck and listened to Mama and Papa talking. "Do you happen to know Sergeant McShane?" Katie asked. "I know who he is. They call him the honest cop. The party has its eye on him. It wouldn't surprise me if he was put up for assemblyman." A man sitting nearby leaned forward and touched Johnny's arm. "Police commissioner is more like it, Mac," he said. "What about his life?" Katie asked. It's like one of those Alger stories. He came from Ireland 25 years ago with nothing but a trunk small enough to be carried on his back. He worked as a dock walloper, studied nights, and got on the force. He kept on studying and taking examinations and finally got to be sergeant," said Johnny. "I suppose he's married to an educated woman who helped him?" "Matter of fact, no. When he first came over, an Irish family took him in and kept him until he got on his feet. The daughter of the family married a bum who ran out on her after the honeymoon and got himself killed in a brawl. Well, the girl was going to have a baby, and you couldn't make the neighbors believe she had ever been married. Seems like the family would be disgraced, but McShane married her and gave the child this name to kind of repay the family. It wasn't a love marriage exactly, but he's been very good to her, I hear." "Did they have children together?" 14, I heard." 14? But he only raised 4. Seemed like they all died before they grew up. They were all born with consumption, you know. Inherited it from their mother, who had it from a girl. "He's had more than his share of trouble," mused Johnny, "and he's a good man." "She's still alive, I suppose." "But very sick. They say she hasn't long to live." "Oh, those kind hang on." "Katie!" Johnny was startled by his wife's remark. "I don't care. I don't blame her for marrying a bum and having a child by him. That's her privilege. But I do blame her for not taking her medicine when the time came due. Why did she put her troubles off onto a good man? That's no way to talk. I hope she dies and dies soon." "Hush, Katie." "Yes, I do, so that he can marry again. Marry a cheerful, healthy woman who will give him children that can live. That's every good man's right." Johnny said nothing. A nameless fear had grown within Francie while she listened to her mother talking. Now she got up and went over to Papa, took his hand, and pressed it hard. In the moonlight, Johnny's eyes flew open in startled surprise. He pulled the child to him and held her tightly, but all he said was, "Look how the moon walks on the water." Soon after the picnic, the organization began to prepare for Election Day. They distributed shiny white buttons with Maddie's mug on them to the neighborhood kids. Francie got some and stared long at the face. Maddie had grown so mysterious to her that he took the place of someone like the Holy Ghost. He was never seen, but his presence was felt. The picture was of a bland-faced man with roached hair and handlebar mustaches. It looked like the face of any small-time politician. Francie wished she could see him just once in the flesh. There was a lot of excitement about these buttons. The children used them for trading purposes, for games and coin of the realm. Neely sold his top to a boy for 10 buttons. Gimpy, the candy store man, redeemed 15 of Francie's buttons for a penny's worth of candy. He had an arrangement with the organization whereby he got the money back for the buttons. Francie went around looking for Maddie and found him all over. She found boys playing pitch games with his face. She found him flattened out on a car track to make a miniature potsy. He was in the debris of Neely's pocket. She peered down the sewer and saw him floating face upward. She found him in the sour soil at the bottoms of gratings. She saw Punky Perkins next door to her in church drop 2 buttons in the plate in lieu of the 2 pennies his mother had given him. She saw him go into the candy store and buy 4 sweet Caporal cigarettes with the 2 cents after Mass. She saw Maddie's face everywhere, but she never saw Maddie. The week before election, she went around with Neely and the boys gathering, quote, lection, which is what they called the lumber for the big bonfires which would be lighted election night. She helped store the lection in the cellar. She was up early on election day and saw the man who came and knocked on the door. When Johnny answered, the man said, "Nolan?" "Yes," admitted Johnny. "At the polls, 11 o'clock. He checked Johnny's name on his list. He handed Johnny a cigar. Compliments of Maddie Mahoney. He went on to the next Democrat. "Wouldn't you go anyhow without being told?" Francie asked. "Yes, but they each give us a time so that the voting is staggered. You know, not everyone coming in a bunch." "Why?" persisted Francie. "'Cause," Johnny evaded. "I'll tell you why," broke in Mama. "They want to keep tabs on who's voting and how. They know when each man's due at the polls, and God help him if he doesn't show up to vote for Maddie." "Women don't know anything about politics," said Johnny, lighting up Maddie's cigar. Francie helped Neely drag their wood out on election night. They contributed it to the biggest bonfire on the block. Francie got in line with the other children and danced around the fire Indian fashion, singing Tammany. When the fire had burned down to embers, the boys raided the pushcarts of the Jewish merchants and stole potatoes, which they roasted in the ashes. So cooked, they were called Mickeys. There weren't enough to go around, and Francie didn't get any. She stood on the street watching the returns come in on a bedsheet stretched from window to window of a house on the corner. A magic lantern across the street threw the figures on the sheet. Each time new returns came in, Francie shouted with the other kids, "Another county heard from." Maddie's picture appeared on the screen from time to time, and the crowd cheered itself hoarse. A Democratic president was elected that year, and the Democratic governor of the state was reelected. But all that Francie knew was that Maddie Mahoney got in again. This is some serious campaigning, isn't it? Phew. After election, the politicians forgot their promises and enjoyed an earned rest until New Year, when they started work on the next election. January 2nd was Ladies' Day at Democratic headquarters. On that day, and no other, ladies were received into this strictly masculine precinct and treated to sherry wine and little seeded cakes. All day the ladies kept calling and were received gallantly by Maddie's henchmen. Maddie himself never showed up. As the ladies went out, they left their little decorated cards with their names written on them in the cut glass dish on the hall table. Katie's contempt for the politicians did not interfere with her making her yearly call. She put on her brushed and pressed gray suit with all the braid on it and tilted her jade green velvet hat over her right eye. She even gave the penman, who set up a temporary shop outside headquarters, a dime to make a card for her. That's a lot. He wrote, "Mrs. John Nolan, with flowers and angels crawling out of the capitals." It was a dime that should have gone into the bank, but Katie figured she could be extravagant once a year. The family awaited her homecoming. They wanted to hear all about the call. "How was it this year?" asked Johnny. "The same as always. The same old push was there. A lot of women had new clothes, which I bet they bought on time. Of course, the prostitutes were the best dressed," said Katie in her forthright way, "and like always, they outnumbered the decent women 2-1. Okay, that's the end of a chapter. Yeah, so kind of a little window into how politics was conducted then. Gonna go ahead and eat my last cracker out of this pack. Still crispy. Okay. Excellent. Now we will be talking about alcoholism. Sweet. Okay, that was a nice little break. Chapter 25. Johnny was one for taking notions. He'd take a notion that life was too much for him and start drinking heavier to forget it. Francie got to know when he was drinking more than usual. He walked straighter coming home. He walked carefully and slightly sidewise. When he was drunk, he was a quiet man. He didn't brawl, he didn't sing, he didn't grow sentimental. He grew thoughtful. People who didn't know him thought that he was drunk when he was sober, because sober he was full of song and excitement. When he was drunk, strangers looked on him as a quiet, thoughtful man who minded his own business. Francie dreaded the drinking periods, not on moral grounds, but because Papa wasn't a man she knew then. He wouldn't talk to her or anybody. He looked at her with the eyes of a stranger. When Mama spoke to him, he turned his head away from her. When he got over a drinking time, he'd take a notion that he had to be a better father to his children. He felt that he had to teach them things. He'd stop drinking for a while, take a notion to work hard and devote all his spare time to Francie and Neely. He had the same idea that Katie's mother, Mary Romilly, had about education. He wanted to teach his children all that he knew, so that at 14 or 15 they would know as much as he knew at 30. He figured that they could go from there, picking up their own knowledge, and according to his calculations, when they reached 30, they would be twice as smart as he had been at 30. He felt that they needed lessons in, for what passed in his mind, geography, civics, and sociology. So he took them over to Bushwick Avenue. Bushwick Avenue was the high-toned boulevard of old Brooklyn. It was a wide, tree-shaded avenue, and the houses were rich and impressively built of large granite blocks with long stone stoops. Here lived the big-time politicians, the moneyed brewery families, the well-to-do immigrants who had been able to come over first class instead of steerage. They had taken their money, their statuary, and their gloomy oil paintings and had come to America and settled in Brooklyn. Automobiles were coming into use, but most of these families still clung to their handsome horses and magnificent carriages. Papa pointed out and described the various equipages to Francie. She watched in awe as they rolled by. There were small, lacquered, dainty ones lined with tufted white satin, with a large fringed umbrella that was used by fine and delicate ladies. There were adorable wicker ones with a bench along each side on which lucky children sat while they were pulled along by a Shetland pony. She stared at the capable-looking governesses who accompanied these children, women from another world, in capes and starch-stringed bonnets who sat sideways on the seat to drive the pony. Francie saw practical black two-seaters drawn by a single high-stepping horse, controlled by dandified young men in kid gloves with edges turned back to look like inverted cuffs. She saw staid family vehicles drawn by dependable-looking teams. These coaches did not impress Francie very much because every undertaker in Williamsburg had a string of them. Francie liked the hansom cabs best. How magic they were with only two wheels, and that funny door that closed by itself when a passenger sat back in the seat. Francie thought in her innocence that the doors were meant to protect the passenger from flying horse manure. If I were a man, thought Francie, that's the job I'd like to have, driving one of them. Oh, to sit high up in the back, with a brave whip in a socket close to hand. Oh, to wear such a great coat with large buttons, and a velvet collar and a squashed-down high hat with a ribbon cockade in the band. Oh, to have such an expensive-looking blanket folded over the knees. Francie imitated the driver's cry under her breath. Carriage, sir? Carriage? Anybody, said Johnny, carried away by his personal dream of democracy, can ride in one of those hansom cabs, provided, he qualified, they got the money. So you can see what a free country we got here. What's free about it if you have to pay? Asked Francie. It's free in this way. If you have the money, you're allowed to ride in them no matter who you are. In the old countries, certain people aren't free to ride in them even if they have the money. Wouldn't it be more of a free country, persisted Francie, if we could ride in them free? No. Why? Because that would be socialism, concluded Johnny triumphantly, and we don't want that over here. Why? Because we're not Russians and don't ever want to be, clinched Johnny. New York City had a mayor from Brooklyn who lived on Bushwick Avenue. Look up and down this block, Francie, and show me where our mayor lives, said Johnny. Francie looked, then had to hang her head and say, I don't know, Papa. There, announced Johnny as though he were blowing a trumpet fanfare. That's it, the house with the 2 lampposts at the bottom of the stoop. No matter where you roam in this great city, he orated, and you come across a home with 2 lampposts like that, you'll know that the mayor of the greatest city in the world lives there. Why does he need 2 lampposts for? Francie wanted to know. Because this is America, and in a country where such things are, concluded Johnny vaguely, but very patriotically, you know that the government is by the people, for the people, of the people, and shall not perish from the face of the earth the way it does in the old countries. He began to sing under his breath. Soon he was carried away by his feeling and started to sing louder. Francie joined in. Johnny sang, You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave, etc., etc. People stared at Johnny curiously, and one kind lady threw him a penny. Francie had another memory about Bushwick Avenue. It was tied up with the scent of roses. There were roses, Bushwick Avenue, streets emptied of traffic, crowds on the sidewalk, the police holding them back. Always the scent of roses. Then came the cavalcade, mounted policemen and a large open motor car in which was seated a genial, kindly-looking man with a wreath of roses around his neck. Some people were weeping with joy as they looked at him. Francie clung to Papa's hand. She heard people around her talking. Just think, he was a Brooklyn boy, too. Was? You dope? He still lives in Brooklyn. Yeah, and he lives right here on Bushwick Avenue. Look at him, a woman cried out. He did such a great thing, and he's still an ordinary man like my husband, only better looking. It must have been cold up there, said a man. It wonders me he didn't freeze his what's-this off, said a bawdy boy. A cadaverous-looking man tapped Johnny on the shoulder. Mac, he inquired, do you actually believe there's a pole up there sticking out on top of the world? Sure, answered Johnny. Didn't he go up there and turn around and hang the American flag on it? And then, just then, a small boy hollered out, Here he comes! Ah! Francie was thrilled by the sound of admiration that swayed the crowd when the car came past where they were standing. Carried away by the excitement, she yelled out shrilly, Hooray for Captain Crook! Hooray for Brooklyn! A cadaverous-looking man is a fantastic description. Yeah, it is kind of, yeah. This book is so well written. Most children brought up in Brooklyn before the First World War remember Thanksgiving Day there with a particular tenderness. Oh, okay, we're going to do Thanksgiving. Let's do a little tea break then. There's a dove out on the roof. I don't know if you hear it. Outside our skylight. Just, doing that really loud cooing thing they do when they're trying to attract attention by a female. Oh my goodness, that caramel and chocolate popcorn is so sweet. Like, I liked the first, however many bites of it. Now it's like, bleh. I'll still eat it because it is good, but with the tea only because it's so sweet. So yeah, holidays. So we're going through the holidays, right? So we've had 4th of July and then Election Day, which I think has probably always been what it is now. The first Tuesday in November. I'm not sure if it's always been, but then Thanksgiving would be next. That makes sense. So next we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. Oh, and they talked about Halloween first, yeah. And then there'll be Christmas. I'm not sure we'll get there today, but then there would be Christmas and there would be New Year's Day. I mean, definitely Easter would be in there somewhere, right? Because these people are very Catholic. Okay. Let's pour it out. Lovely. Got a little tiny twig on there this time. I do love the swirl in the bottom of this teacup. It's cool. I think you can see it in the camera. Yeah. In spite of the ring light being so shiny. There is nothing like that sip of hot tea. I have been drinking it as it, cools, but hot is definitely best with sweets. Okay. So Thanksgiving. Most children brought up in Brooklyn before the First World War remember Thanksgiving Day there with a particular tenderness. It was the day children went around ragamuffin or slamming gates, wearing costumes topped off by a penny mask. See, I'd never heard of that before reading this book. Francie chose her mask with great care. She bought a yellow Chinaman one with sleazy rope mandarin mustaches. Neely bought a chalk-white death head with grinning black teeth. Papa came through at the last minute with a penny tin horn for each, red for Francie, green for Neely. What a time Francie had getting Neely into his costume. He wore one of Mama's discarded dresses, hacked off ankle length in the front to enable him to walk. The uncut back made a dirty dragging train. He stuffed wadded newspapers in the front to make an enormous bust. His broken out, brass-tipped shoes stuck out in front of the dress. Lest he freeze, he wore a ragged sweater over the ensemble. With this costume, he wore the death mask and one of Papa's discarded derbies cocked on his head. Only it was too big and wouldn't cock and rested on his ears. Francie wore one of Mama's yellow waists, a bright blue skirt, and a red sash. She held the Chinaman mask on by a red bandana over her head, and tied under her chin. Mama made her wear her zitful cap, Katie's own name for a wool stocking cap, over her headgear because it was a cold day. Francie put 2 walnuts for decoys in her last year's Easter basket, and the children set out. Yeah, 2 bizarre images, right? It sounds like it's another trick-or-treating. Or it sounds like it might be the only trick-or-treating they had, because on Halloween they did something different. They didn't trick-or-treat. They were just like hooligans, kind of, on Halloween. The street was jammed with masked and costumed children, making a deafening din with their penny tin horns. Some kids were too poor to buy a penny mask. They had blackened their faces with burnt cork. Other children with more prosperous parents had store costumes. Sleazy Indian suits, cowboy suits, and cheesecloth Dutch maiden dresses. A few indifferent ones simply draped a dirty sheet over themselves and called it a costume. Some things never change. Francie got pushed in with a compact group of children and went the rounds with them. Some storekeepers locked their doors against them, but most of them had something for the children. The candy store man had hoarded all broken bits of candy for weeks, and now passed it out in little bags for all who came begging. He had to do this because he lived on the pennies of the youngsters and he didn't want to be boycotted. The bakery stores obliged by baking up batches of soft, doughy cookies, which they gave away. Children were the marketers of the neighborhood, and they would only patronize those stores that treated them well. The bakery people were aware of this. The greengrocer obliged with decaying bananas and half-rotted apples. Some stores which had nothing to gain from the children neither locked them out nor gave them anything save a profane lecture on the evils of begging. These people were rewarded by terrific and repeated bangings of the front door by the children, hence the term slamming gates. By noon, it was all over. Francie was tired of her unwieldy costume. Her mask had crumpled. It was made of cheap gauze, heavily starched and dried in shape over a mold. A boy had taken her tin horn and broken it in two across his knee. She met Neely coming along with a bloody nose. He had been in a fight with another boy who wanted to take his basket. Neely wouldn't say who won, but he had the other boy's basket besides his own. They went home to a good Thanksgiving dinner of pot roast and homemade noodles and spent the afternoon listening to Papa reminisce how he had gone around Thanksgiving Day as a boy. It was at a Thanksgiving time that Francie told her first organized lie, was found out, and determined to be a writer. The day before Thanksgiving, there were exercises in Francie's room. Each of 4 chosen girls recited a Thanksgiving poem and held in her hand a symbol of the day. I think they mean her room at school. One held an ear of dried up corn, another a turkey's foot meant to stand for the whole turkey. A third girl held a basket of apples, and the fourth held a 5-cent pumpkin pie, which was the size of a small saucer. After the exercises, the turkey foot and corn were thrown into the wastebasket. Teacher set aside the apples to take home. 30 mouths watered, 30 hands itched to go up into the air, but no one moved. Some were poor, many were hungry, and all were too proud to accept charitable food. When no one responded, teacher ordered the pie thrown away. Francie couldn't stand it. That beautiful pie thrown away, and she had never tasted pumpkin pie. To her, it was the food of covered wagon people, of Indian fighters. She was dying to taste it. In a flash, she invented a lie, and up went her hand. "I'm glad someone wants it," said teacher. "I don't want it for myself," lied Francie proudly. "I know a very poor family I'd like to give it to." "Good," said teacher. "That's the real Thanksgiving spirit." Francie ate the pie while walking home that afternoon. Whether it was her conscience or the unfamiliar flavor, she didn't enjoy the pie. It tasted like soap. The Monday following, teacher saw her in the hall before class and asked her how the poor family had enjoyed the pie. They liked it a whole lot, Francie told her. Then when she saw teacher there looking so interested, she embellished the story. "This family has 2 little girls with golden curls and big blue eyes." "And?" prompted teacher. And they're twins. How interesting." Francie was inspired. "One of them has the name Pamela and the other Camilla." These were names that Francie had once chosen for her non-existent dolls. "And they are very, very poor," suggested teacher. "Oh, very poor. They didn't have anything to eat for 3 days and just would have died, the doctor said, if I didn't bring them that pie." "That was such a tiny pie," commented teacher gently, "to save 2 lives." Francie knew then that she had gone too far. She hated whatever that thing was inside her that made her invent such whoppers. Teacher bent down and put her arms around Francie. Francie saw that there were tears in her eyes. Francie went to pieces and remorse rose in her like bitter floodwaters. "That's all a big lie," she confessed. "I ate the pie myself." "I know you did." "Don't send a letter home," begged Francie, thinking of the address she didn't own. "I'll stay after school every day for—" "I'll not punish you for having an imagination." Gently, teacher explained the difference between a lie and a story. A lie was something you told because you were mean or a coward. A story was something you made up out of something that might have happened. Only you didn't tell it like it was, you told it like you thought it should have been. As teacher talked, a great trouble left Francie. Lately, she had been given to exaggerating things. She did not report happenings truthfully, but gave them color, excitement, and dramatic twists. Katie was annoyed at this tendency and kept warning Francie to tell the plain truth and to stop romancing. But Francie just couldn't tell the plain, undecorated truth. She had to put something to it. Although Katie had the same flair for coloring an incident, and Johnny himself lived in a half-dream world, yet they tried to squelch these things in their child. Maybe they had good reason. Maybe they knew their own gift of imagination colored too rosily the poverty and brutality of their lives and made them able to endure it. Perhaps Katie thought that if they did not have this faculty, they would be clearer-minded, see things as they really were, and seeing them loathe them and somehow find a way to make them better. Francie always remembered what that kind teacher told her. You know, Francie, a lot of people would think that these stories that you're making up all the time were terrible lies because they are not the truth as people see the truth. In the future, when something comes up, you tell exactly how it happened, but write down for yourself the way you think it should have happened. Tell the truth and write the story. Then you won't get mixed up. It was the best advice Francie ever got. Truth and fancy were so mixed up in her mind, as they are in the mind of every lonely child, that she didn't know which was which. But teacher made two things clear to her. From that time on, she wrote little stories about things she saw and felt and did. In time, she got so that she was able to speak the truth with but a slight and instinctive coloring of the facts. Francie was 10 years old when she first found an outlet in writing. What she wrote was of little consequence. What was important was that the attempt to write stories kept her straight on the dividing line between truth and fiction. If she had not found this outlet in writing, she might have grown up to be a tremendous liar. That's pretty good. Okay, let's read about Christmas, and then maybe that's going to be probably the end for today. Although I think there's a little bit of... There's still a fair amount of Christmas, but I feel like I kind of want to get to that, if that's okay with you guys. If you have to go, though, maybe let me know and we can save Christmas for next time. I'm really glad that she moved to a school with a good teacher, huh? In future, I will be eating this popcorn in smaller doses, that's for sure. Literally, one decent teacher can make a world of difference. Yeah, exactly. You can stay for a little bit. Okay, let's look at Christmas, because I don't remember any of this really. So I'm curious too. Plus, we have a snowflake. Okay, we're ready. Christmas was a charmed time in Brooklyn. It was in the air long before it came. The first hint of it was Mr. Morton going around the schools teaching Christmas carols. But the first sure sign was the store windows. You have to be a child to know how wonderful is a store window filled with dolls and sleds and other toys. And this wonder came free to Francie. It was nearly as good as actually having the toys, to be permitted to look at them through the glass window. Oh, what thrill there was for Francie when she turned a street corner and saw another store all fixed up for Christmas. Ah, the clean, shining window with cotton batting sprinkled with stardust for a carpet. There were flaxen-haired dolls and others which Francie liked better, who had hair the color of good coffee with lots of cream in it. Their faces were perfectly tinted, and they wore clothes the like of which Francie had never seen on earth. The dolls stood upright in flimsy cardboard boxes. They stood with the help of a bit of tape passed around the neck and ankles and through holes at the back of the box. Oh, the deep blue eyes framed by thick lashes that stared straight into a little girl's heart, and the perfect miniature hands extended, appealingly asking, "Please, won't you be my mama?" And Francie never had a doll except a 2-inch one that cost a nickel. She had never had a doll. And the sleds, or as the Williamsburg children called them, the sleighs. There was a child's dream of heaven come true. A new sled with a flower someone had dreamed up, painted on it, a deep blue flower with bright green leaves, the ebony black painted runners, the smooth steering bar made of hardwood, and gleaming varnish over all, and the names painted on them: Rosebud, Magnolia, Snow King, the Flyer. Thought Francie, if I could only have one of those, I'd never ask God for another thing as long as I live. There were roller skates made of shining nickel with straps of good brown leather and silvered, nervous wheels tensed for rolling, needing but a breath to start them turning as they lay crossed one over the other, sprinkled with mica snow on a bed of cloud-like cotton. There were other marvelous things. Francie couldn't take them all in. Her head spun and she was dizzy with the impact of all the seeing and all the making up of stories about the toys in the shop windows. The spruce trees began coming into the neighborhood the week before Christmas. Their branches were corded to hold back the glory of their spreading and probably to make shipping easier. Vendors rented space on the curb before a store and stretched a rope from pole to pole and leaned the trees against it. All day they walked up and down this one-sided avenue of aromatic leaning trees, blowing on stiff, ungloved fingers and looking with bleak hope at those who paused. A few ordered a tree set aside for the day. Others stopped to price, inspect, and conjecture. But most came just to touch the boughs and surreptitiously pinch a fingerful of spruce needles together to release the fragrance. And the air was cold and still and full of the pine smell and the smell of tangerines, which appeared in the stores only at Christmas time. And the mean street was truly wonderful for a little while. There was a cruel custom in the neighborhood. It was about the trees still unsold when midnight of Christmas Eve approached. There was a saying that if you waited until then, you wouldn't have to buy a tree, that they'd chuck them at you. This was literally true. At midnight on the eve of our dear Savior's birth, the kids gathered where there were unsold trees. The man threw each tree in turn, starting with the biggest. Kids volunteered to stand up against the throwing. If a boy didn't fall down under the impact, the tree was his. Only the roughest boys, if he fell, he forfeited his chance at winning a tree. Only the roughest boys and some of the young men elected to be hit by the big trees. The others waited shrewdly until a tree came up that they could stand against. The littlest kids waited for the tiny foot-high trees and shrieked in delight when they won one. On the Christmas Eve when Francie was 10 and Neely 9, Mama consented them to let them go down and have their first try for a tree. Francie had picked out her tree earlier in the day. She had stood near it all afternoon and evening praying that no one would buy it. To her joy, it was still there at midnight. It was the biggest tree in the neighborhood, and its price was so high that no one could afford to buy it. It was 10 feet high. Its branches were bound with new white rope, and it came to a sure, pure point at the top. The man took this tree out first. Before Francie could speak up, a neighborhood bully, a boy of 18 known as Punky Perkins, stepped forward and ordered the man to chuck the tree at him. The man hated the way Punky was so confident. He looked around and asked, "Anybody else want to take a chance on it?" A chanced. Francie stepped forward. "Me, mister." A spurt of derisive laughter came from the tree man. I apologize, my reading's terrible today. From the tree man. The kids snickered. A few adults who had gathered to watch the fun guffawed. "Aw, go on, you're too little," the tree man objected. "Me and my brother, we're not too little together." She pulled Neely forward. The man looked at them, a thin girl of 10, with starveling hollows in her cheeks, but the chin still baby round. He looked at the little boy with his fair hair and round blue eyes. Neely Nolan, all innocence and trust. "Two ain't fair," yelped Punky. "Shut your lousy trap," advised the man who held all power in that hour. "These here kids has got nerve. Stand back, the rest of yous. These kids is going to have a show at this tree." The others made a wavering lane. Francie and Neely stood at one end of it and the big man with the big tree at the other. It was a human funnel, with Francie and her brother making the small end of it. The man flexed his great arms to throw the great tree. He noticed how tiny the children looked at the end of the short lane. For the split part of a moment, the tree thrower went through a kind of Gethsemane. "Oh, Jesus Christ," his soul agonized. "Why don't I just give him the tree, say Merry Christmas, and let him go? What's the tree to me? I can't sell it no more this year, and it won't keep till next year." The kids watched him solemnly as he stood there in his moment of thought. But then he rationalized, if I did that, all the others would expect to get him handed to him, and next year nobody at all would buy a tree off me. They'd all wait to get 'em handed to 'em on a silver plate. I ain't a big enough man to give this tree away for nothing. No, I ain't big enough. I ain't big enough to do a thing like that. I gotta think of myself and my own kids. He finally came to his conclusion. Oh, what the hell, them 2 kids has gotta live in this world. They got to get used to it. They gotta learn to give and to take punishment, and by Jesus, it ain't give, but take all the time in this goddamn world. As he threw the tree with all his strength, his heart wailed out, it's a goddamn rotten, lousy world. Francie saw the tree leave his hands. There was a split bit of being when time and space had no meaning. The whole world stood still as something dark and monstrous came through the air. The tree came towards her, blotting out all memory of her ever having lived. There was nothing but pungent darkness and something that grew and grew as it rushed at her. She staggered as the tree hit them. Neely went to his knees, but she pulled him up fiercely before he could go down. There was a mighty swishing sound as the tree settled. Everything was dark, green, and prickly. Then she felt a sharp pain at the side of her head where the trunk of the tree had hit her. She felt Neely trembling. When some of the older boys pulled the tree away, they found Francie and her brother standing upright, hand in hand. Blood was coming from scratches on Neely's face. He looked more like a baby than ever, with his bewildered blue eyes and the fairness of his skin made more noticeable because of the clear red blood. But they were smiling. Had they not won the biggest tree in the neighborhood? Some of the boys hollered, "Hooray!" A few adults clapped. The tree man eulogized them by screaming, "And now get the hell out of here with your tree, you lousy bastards!" Francie had heard swearing since she had heard words. Obscenity and profanity had no meaning as such among those people. They were emotional expressions of inarticulate people with small vocabularies. They made a kind of dialect. The phrases could mean many things according to the expression and tone used in saying them. So now when Francie heard themselves called lousy bastards, she smiled tremulously at the kind man. She knew that he was really saying, "Goodbye, God bless you." Punky was my nickname when I was 3. Wow. That's fun. That's a cute nickname. It wasn't easy dragging the tree home. They had to pull it inch by inch. They were handicapped by a boy who ran alongside yelping, "Free ride, all aboard," who'd jump on and make them drag him along. But he got sick of the game eventually and went away. In a way, it was good that it took them so long to get the tree home. It made their triumph more drawn out. Francie glowed when she heard a lady say, "I never saw such a big tree." A man called after them, "You kids must have robbed a bank to buy such a big tree." And here's a picture of the tree in midair coming at them. I didn't ever expect, when I read this before, I never pictured the tree flying this way, right? I was thinking the man would pitch it like and that it would come like straight on. But maybe he put his arms around it and like flung it sideways from an upright position. I pictured it as coming like, a torpedo, like he threw it, horizontally. The cop on their corner stopped them, examined the tree, and solemnly offered to buy it for 10 cents, 50 cents if they deliver it to his home. Francie nearly burst with pride, although she knew he was joking. She said she wouldn't sell it for $1 even. He shook his head and said she was foolish not to grab the offer. He went up to $1, but Francie kept smiling and shaking her head no. Oh, hey, Apex, welcome in. We're reading about Christmas in 1900. I'm not sure exactly the year. 19aughts, Brooklyn. It was like acting in a Christmas play where the setting was a street corner, and the time a frosty Christmas Eve, and the characters a kind cop, her brother, and herself. Francie knew all the dialogue. The cop gave his lines right, and Francie picked up her cues happily, and the stage directions were the smiles between the spoken lines. They had to call up Papa to help them get the tree up the narrow stairs. Papa came running down. To Francie's relief, he ran down straight and not sideways, which proved that he was still sober. Papa's amazement at the size of the tree was flattering. He pretended to believe that it wasn't theirs. Francie had a lot of fun convincing him, although she knew all the while that the whole thing was make-believe. Papa pulled in front, and Francie and Neely pushed in back, and they began forcing the big tree up the 3 narrow flights of stairs. Johnny was so excited that he started singing, not caring that it was rather late at night. He sang Holy Night. The narrow walls took up his clear, sweet voice, held it for a breath, and gave it back with doubled sweetness. Doors creaked open, and families gathered on the landings, pleased and amazed at the something unexpected being added to that moment of their lives. Francie saw the Tinmore girls standing together in their doorway, their gray hair in crimpers and ruffled starch nightgowns showing under their voluminous wrappers. They added their thin, poignant voices to Johnny's. That's right, that's the piano teacher and the voice teacher. Floss Gaddis, her mother, and her brother Henny, who was dying of consumption, stood in their doorway. Henny was crying, and when Johnny saw him, he let the song trail off. He thought maybe it made Henny too sad. Flossie was in costume, waiting for an escort to take her to a masquerade ball, which started soon after midnight. She stood there in her Klondike dance hall girl costume, with sheer black silk stockings, spool-heeled slippers, one red garter fastened under a knee, and swinging a black mask in her hand. She smiled into Johnny's eyes. She put her hand on her hip and leaned seductively, or so she thought, against the door jamb. More to make Henny smile than anything else, Johnny said, "Floss, we got no angel for the top of this Christmas tree. How about you obliging?" Floss was all ready to make a dirty reply about the wind blowing her drawers off as she was up that high, but she changed her mind. There was something about the big proud tree, now so humble and being dragged, something about the beaming children, something about the rare goodwill of the neighbors and the way the lights looked turned low in the halls that made her ashamed of her unspoken reply. All she said was, "Gee, ain't you the kidder, Johnny Nolan?" Yeah, hey, Apex, how's it going? So I'm not sure I can eat any more of this monstrosity, but I'll briefly show you this was some of the Brugge Bakery. It used to have 2 more arms, but it's a cinnamon snowflake bread, and the filling is cinnamon flavored white bean paste, which I have never even heard of before, but it's pretty good. But you know how filling the bean paste can be, and this thing is as big as a small dinner plate. It's okay, you'll eat it? Yeah. I already ate a mini lunch and some of this and a whole bunch of this caramel popcorn that also has white and brown chocolate on it, and some crackers. So, I'm getting pretty full. Zebra popcorn, yes, that's what they call it. That's right. My first time having that. It's pretty sweet. So yeah, and umpteen steepings of this oolong from Nepal that I've definitely had on stream before. This one. Okay, the tea definitely helps. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think they got the Christmas tree up the stairs eventually. Katie stood alone on the top of the last flight of steps with her hands clasped before her. She listened to the singing. She looked down and watched their slow progress up the stairs. She was thinking deeply. They think this is so good, she thought. They think it's good. The tree they got for nothing, and their father playing up to them, and the singing, and the way the neighbors are happy. They think they're mighty lucky that they're living, and that it's Christmas again. They can't see that we live on a dirty street, in a dirty house among people who aren't much good. Johnny and the children can't see how pitiful it is that our neighbors have to make happiness out of this filth and dirt. My children must get out of this. They must come to more than Johnny or me or all these people around us. But how is this to come about? Reading a page from those books every day and saving pennies in the tin can bank isn't enough. Money. Would that make it better for them? Yes, it would make it easy, but no, the money wouldn't be enough. McGarity owns the saloon standing on the corner, and he has a lot of money. His wife wears diamond earrings, but her children are not as good and smart as my children. They are mean and greedy towards others because they have the things to taunt poor children with. I have seen the McGarity girl eating from a bag of candy on the street while a ring of hungry children watched her. I saw those children looking at her and crying in their hearts. And when she couldn't eat anymore, she threw the rest down the sewer rather than give it to them. Ah, no, it isn't the money alone. The McGarity girl wears a different hair bow each day, and they cost 50 cents apiece, and that would feed the 4 of us here for one day. But her hair is thin and pale red. My Neely has a big hole in his zipfel cap, and it's stretched out of shape, but he has thick, deep golden hair that curls. My Francie wears no hair bow, but her hair is long and shiny. Can money buy things like that? Nope. That means there must be something bigger than money. Miss Jackson teaches at the settlement house, and she has no money. She works for charity. She lives in a little room there on the top floor. She only has the one dress, but she keeps it clean and pressed. Her eyes look straight into yours when you talk with her. When you listen to her, it's like you used to be sick, but hearing her voice, it's making you well again. She knows about things, Miss Jackson. She understands about things. She can live in the middle of a dirty neighborhood and be fine and clean and like an actress in a play, someone you can look at but who is too fine to touch. There is that difference between her and Mrs. McGarity, who has so much money but is too fat and acts in a dirty way with the truck drivers who deliver her husband's beer. So what is this difference between her and this Miss Jackson who has no money? An answer came to Katie. It was so simple that a flash of astonishment that felt like pain shot through her head. Education. That was it. It was education that made the difference. Education would pull them out of the grime and dirt. Proof? Miss Jackson was educated. The McGarity wasn't. Oh, that's what Mary Romilly, her mother, had been telling her all those years. Only her mother did not have the one clear word, education. Watching the children struggling up the stairs with their tree, listening to their voices still so baby-like, she got these ideas about education. Francie is smart, she thought. She must go to high school. And maybe beyond that. She's a learner and she'll be somebody someday. But when she gets educated, she will grow away from me. Why, she's growing away from me now. She does not love me the way the boy loves me. I feel her turn away from me. She does not understand me. All she understands is that I don't understand her. Maybe when she gets education, she will be ashamed of me, the way I talk. But she will have too much character to show it. Instead, she will try to make me different. She will come to see me and try to make me live in a better way, and I will be mean to her because I know I'll know she's above me. She will figure out too much about things as she grows older. She'll get to know too much for her own happiness. She'll find out that I don't love her as much as I love the boy. I cannot help it that this is so, but she won't understand that. Sometimes I think she knows that now. Already she is growing away from me. She will fight to get away soon. Changing over to that faraway school was the first step in her getting away from me. But Neely will never leave me. That is why I love him best. He will cling to me and understand me. I want him to be a doctor. He must be a doctor. Maybe he will play the fiddle, too. There is music in him. He got that from his father. He has gone further on the piano than Francie or me. Yes, his father has the music in him, but it does him no good. It is ruining him. If he couldn't sing, those men who treat him to drinks wouldn't want him around. What good is the fine way he can sing when it doesn't make him or us any better? With the boy, it will be different. He'll be educated. I must think out ways. We'll not have Johnny with us long. Dear God, I loved him so much once, and sometimes I still do, but he's worthless. Worthless, and God forgive me for ever finding it out. Thus, Katie figured out everything in the moments it took for them to climb the stairs. People looking up at her smooth, pretty, vivacious face, had no way of knowing about the painfully articulated resolves formulating in her mind. They set the tree up in the front room after spreading a sheet to protect the carpet of pink roses from falling pine needles. The tree stood in a big tin bucket with broken bricks to hold it upright. When the rope was cut away, the branches spread out to fill the whole room. They draped over the piano, and it was so that some of the chairs stood among the branches. There was no money to buy tree decorations or lights, but the great tree standing there was enough. The room was cold. It was a poor year, that one, too poor for them to buy the extra coal for the front room stove. The room smelled cold and clean and aromatic. Every day during the week, the tree stood there. Francie put on her sweater and zipfel cap and went in and sat under the tree. She sat there and enjoyed the smell and the dark greenness of it. Oh, the mystery of a great tree, a prisoner in a tin wash bucket in a tenement front room. Just a second. Cozy. Yeah, there were campfire notes in the tea. You can kind of smell some kind of roastiness happening there. Poor as they were that year, it was a very nice Christmas, and the children did not lack for gifts. Mama gave each of them a pair of long woolen drawers, drop seat style, and a woolen shirt with long sleeves and itchy insides. Aunt Evie gave them a joint present, a box of dominoes. Papa showed them how to play. Neely didn't like the game, so Papa and Francie played together, and he pretended to be disgusted when he lost. Grandma Mary Romilly brought over something very nice that she had made herself. She brought each a scapular. To make it, she cut out, so this is something I didn't know what it was until I read this. To make it, she cut out 2 small ovals of bright red wool. On one, she embroidered a cross of bright blue yarn, and on the other, a golden heart crowned with brown thorns. A black dagger went through the heart, and 2 drops of deep red blood dripped from the dagger point. The cross and heart were very tiny and made with microscopic stitches. The 2 ovals were stitched together and attached to a piece of corset string. Mary Romilly had taken the scapulars to be blessed by the priest before she brought them over. As she slipped the scapular over Francie's head, she said, "All right, I don't speak German. Hang on a second." My consultant also doesn't know how to pronounce this, so hang on. I think it says Heiliges Weihnachten. Then she added, "May you walk with the angels always." Aunt Sissy gave Francie a tiny package. She opened it and found a tiny matchbox. It was very fragile and covered with crinkly paper with a miniature spray of purple wisteria printed on the top. Francie pushed the box open. It held 10 discs individually wrapped in pink tissue. The discs turned out to be bright golden pennies. Sissy explained that she had bought a bit of gold paint powder, mixed it with a few drops of banana oil, and had gilded each penny. Francie loved Sissy's present the best of all. A dozen times within the hour of receiving it, she slid open the box slowly, gaining great pleasure from holding the box and looking at it and watching the cobalt blue paper and the clean wafer-thin wood of the inside of the box appear. The golden pennies wrapped in the dreamlike tissue were a never-tiring miracle. Everyone agreed that the pennies were too beautiful to be spent. During the day, Francie lost 2 of her pennies somewhere. Mama suggested they'd be safest in the tin can bank. She promised that Francie could have them back when the bank was open. Francie was sure that Mama was right about the pennies being safest in the bank, yet it was a wrench to let those golden pennies drop down into the darkness. My consultant, yeah, Mr. Oolong studied German in high school or something. High school, so I was hoping that he could help me. Okay, one more steeping of tea. Although my kettle turned itself off because, out of neglect, I guess. We studied an hour of it. Here's I'll just hold this up to the camera. Maybe somebody knows what this means. Oh, can you read it? I sounded it out in German. Heiliges Weihnachten. Weihnachten, we would say, right? Weihnachten. But I have no idea. Unless that just means Happy Christmas or Happy New Year's, Happy Christmas Eve. Happy Christmas Eve. I don't know. Okay, tea time. Problem is, German's not a Romance language, so I can't just guess. We studied like an hour of it. Okay, here we go. I think I could do one more infusion of this. I added some fresh leaves a while back to kind of refresh it. Oops. It just did that thing I was talking about where it, either that or I overfilled it. But the water comes up over the lid. No problem. I just won't touch that part. Holy Christmas, literally. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I had never heard of a scapular before. It's basically an amulet made out of 2 pieces of wool stitched together. I was halfway thinking maybe something was stitched inside it in between, but it doesn't say that. It says it's all, embroidered and then stitched together and then put on a string. It means the consecrated night, which is like Christmas Eve through the day after Christmas. Oh, thank you. Team's got this. Thank you, consultant team. Okay, let's go ahead and pour that out. If there's something that can be Googled, I'm there. Apex, I love that emote so much. Cute. The tea still has great color and looks great on the stream, I must say, but it doesn't have that much flavor left. But that's okay, because that means I'm not maybe, over drinking too much caffeine or tannins or whatever. I mean, I hope that's what it means. We'll find out later. Okay, well, I want to at least finish the Christmas portion. I'm all giving each other their gifts. So I think that'll be the end of this chapter. Will be it. Then it goes on about it starts something else, So let's go to the end of this chapter. As I was discussing earlier, Book 3 is incredibly long compared to Book 1 and Book 2, so there's no way we can go like 125 more pages beyond this. Not today. Okay, here we go. More gifts. Papa had a special present for Francie. It was a postcard with a church on it. Powdered isinglass was pasted on the roof, and it glistened more brightly than real snow. The church window panes were made of tiny squares of shiny orange paper. The magic in this card was that when Francie held it up, light streamed through the paper panes and threw golden shadows on the glistening snow. It was a beautiful thing. Mama said that since it wasn't written on, Francie could save it for next year and mail it to someone. Oh no, said Francie. She put both hands over the card and held it to her chest. Mama laughed. You must learn to take a joke, Francie, otherwise life will be pretty hard on you. Christmas is no day for lessons, said Papa. But it is a day for getting drunk, isn't it? She flared up. 2 drinks is all I had, Katie, Johnny pleaded. I was treated for Christmas. Francie went into the bedroom and shut the door. She couldn't bear to hear Mama scolding Papa. Just before supper, Francie distributed the gifts she had for them. She had a hat pin holder for Mama. She had made it with a penny test tube bought at Knight's drugstore. She had covered it with a sheath of blue satin ribbon ruffled at the sides. A length of baby ribbon was sewn to the top. It was meant to hang on the side of the dresser and hold hat pins. She had a watch fob for Papa. She had made it on a spool which had 4 nails driven into the top. It took 2 shoelaces. These were worked over and around the nails, and a thick braided fob kept growing out of the bottom of the spool as she worked it. Johnny had no watch, but he took an iron faucet washer, attached the fob to it, and wore it in his vest pocket all day, pretending it was a watch. Francie had a very fine present for Neely, a 5-cent shooter which looked like an oversized opal rather than a marble. Neely had a box full of Miggy, small brown and blue speckled marbles made of clay, which cost a penny for 20. But he had no good shooter, and he couldn't get into any important games. Francie watched him as he crooked his forefinger and cradled the marble in it with his thumb behind it. It looked nice and natural that way, and she was glad she had got it for him rather than the nickel pop gun she had first thoughts of buying. Neely shoved the marble in his pocket and announced that he had presents too. He ran into the bedroom, crawled under his cot, and came out with a sticky bag. He thrust it at Mama, saying, "You share them out." He stood in a corner. Mama opened the bag. There was a striped candy cane for each one. Mama went into ecstasy. She said it was the prettiest present she ever had. She kissed Neely 3 times. Francie tried very hard not to be jealous because Mama made more fuss over Neely's present than hers. It was in the same week that Francie told another great lie. Aunt Evie brought over 2 tickets. Some Protestant organization was giving a celebration for the poor of all faiths. There would be a decorated Christmas tree on the stage, a Christmas play, carol singing, and a gift for each child. Katie couldn't see it. Catholic children at a Protestant party. Evie urged tolerance. Mama finally gave in, and Francie and Neely went to the party. It was in a large auditorium. The boys sat on one side and the girls on the other. The celebration was fine, except that the play was religious and dull. After the play, church ladies went down the aisle and gave each child a gift. All the girls got checkerboards and all the boys got lotto games. After a little more singing, a lady came out on the stage and announced a special surprise. The surprise was a lovely little girl, exquisitely dressed, who came from the wings carrying a beautiful doll. The doll was a foot high, had real yellow hair and blue eyes that opened and shut, with real eyelashes. The lady led the child forward and made a speech. "This little girl is named Mary." Little Mary smiled and bowed. The little girls in the audience smiled up at her, and some of the boys who were approaching adolescence. Oh, Appetite Cooking is rating. Wow, with a whole bunch of viewers too. All right, let me go on camera to say hello. Hey everybody, welcome in. Oh my gosh, Tabatai Cooking. Thank you so much for bringing your friends along. What were you guys streaming? We were almost finished with our reading for today, but I definitely want to say hi to you guys. Hi, welcome in. This is our cozy kind of corner. I do tea on every stream, but we have like little things that we do in addition. So yeah, we're reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn right now, and we always have this, relaxing music. Sometimes I'll do wax seals, and sometimes we just focus on the tea. And then there's other times that I play, Baldur's Gate or some other game. There's always tea, though, no matter what. So, hey there. Welcome in, Joseph Rooks. Good to see you. Yeah. And let's see, you guys were doing a Christmas decoration review stream and some travel photo slideshows. Oh, that's awesome. Was this from recent travel? Did you guys go to Japan again? Yeah. Apex is asking the same question. Please fill us in. So here's what we have going on. I know it's kind of zoomed in because we were looking at illustrations of the book, but here's basically what's happening right now. I do have a bunch of antique books that I stacked up over here. This copy is not very antique. This is just kind of a standard edition, from the 80s or whatever. But and then we have, I only ate 2 pieces of this, but this was a snowflake shape. It's a Japanese bread from Brugge Bakery, and it's something I never saw before, a cinnamon snowflake. It has cinnamon flavored white bean paste in the middle. Otherwise, it's pretty much like a cinnamon roll, although it is made of bread, not pastry. Meeple shaped. But you might have to picture the 2 remaining, pieces like this and this. And then these are some scallion crackers that I was munching because I was a little sweet overwhelmed because I'm also eating this zebra popcorn, which is caramel popcorn with white and dark, chocolate stripes on it. And then I've also decorated the table with some wax seals that I've made on other streams. It's like, for example, so we have just kind of decorated here. And then this is the tea section over here. And I'm drinking an oolong tea from Nepal that I bought years ago and haven't been back to for a while. And it matches well with all this sweet food. It was actually Japan photos from 2016 mostly. I wasn't a streamer yet back then, so there was a lot of previously unseen content. Oh, that makes sense. You folks always do make awesome meals, it's true. If it only had one piece missing, it would be meeple shaped. That's fun. Oolong tea, yes. I know, very on brand. Sometimes I drink white tea on stream. I drink a lot of black tea off of stream, like every morning for breakfast. But I don't tend to drink it on stream because it's like late afternoon, evening this time. And so I found that if I drink too much, like black tea, not only does it keep me up all night, it can upset my stomach a little bit. It's just a little intense. So oolong is usually perfect for this stream. Yeah. What do you guys like? So we actually were kind of wrapping up a little bit. I might be able to read a little bit longer, like an extra chapter, just so you guys can kind of get a feel for it. But we're reading, again, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. It's like a super classic book about immigrants in the 1900s. I think it's 1908, I think is where we're at right now. And so there's a lot of social commentary in here about poverty and immigrants and politics we've had. And we're talking about the holidays right now, so we're up to Christmas. A lot of interesting stuff, real kind of window into how people used to live. So I am going to go back to that, and if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat, okay? Thanks so much for coming by. Okay, so the kids, the protagonists, are at a Christmas like party / pageant is kind of how I'm reading that. But it's actually put on by Protestants, and these kids are Catholic, but their mom let them go anyway. A celebration for the poor of all faiths, and they all got a gift. And then just as you guys got here, I was reading this part that says, after a little more singing, a lady came out on the stage and announced a special surprise. The surprise was a lovely little girl, exquisitely dressed, who came from the wings carrying a beautiful doll. The doll was a foot high, had real yellow hair and blue eyes that opened and shut with real eyelashes. The lady led the child forward and made a speech. This little girl is named Mary. Little Mary smiled and bowed. The little girls in the audience smiled up at her, and some of the boys who were approaching adolescence whistled shrilly. Mary's mother bought this doll and had clothes made for it, just like the clothes little Mary is wearing. Little Mary stepped forward and held the doll high in the air. Then she let the lady hold it while she spread her skirt and made a curtsy. It was true, saw Francie. The doll's lace-trimmed blue silk dress, pink hair bow, black patent leather slippers, and white silk socks duplicated exactly the clothes of the beautiful Mary. Now, said the lady, this doll is named Mary after the kind little girl who is giving her away. Again, the little girl smiled graciously. Mary wants to give the doll to some poor little girl in the audience who is named Mary. Like wind on growing corn, a rippling murmur came from all the little girls in the audience. Is there any poor little girl in the audience named Mary? There was a great hush. There were at least 100 Marys in that audience. It was the adjective poor that struck them dumb. No Mary would stand up, no matter how much she wanted the doll, and be a symbol of all the poor little girls in the audience. They began whispering to each other that they weren't poor and had better dolls home and better clothes than that girl too, only they didn't feel like wearing them. Francie sat numb, longing for that doll with all her soul. What, said the lady? No Marys? She waited and made her announcement again. No response. She spoke regretfully. Too bad there are no Marys. Little Mary will have to take the doll home again. The little girl smiled and bowed and turned to leave the stage with the doll. Francie couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand it. It was like when the teacher was going to throw the pumpkin pie in the wastebasket. She stood up and held her hand high in the air. The lady saw it and stopped the little girl from leaving the stage. Ah, we do have a Mary, a very bashful Mary, but a Mary just the same. Come right up on the stage, Mary. Feverish with embarrassment, Francie walked up the long aisle and onto the stage. She stumbled on the steps, and all the girls snickered and the boys guffawed. "What is your name?" asked the lady. "Mary Frances Nolan," whispered Francie. "Louder, and look at the audience." Miserably, Francie faced the audience and said loudly, "Mary Frances Nolan." All the faces looked like bloated balloons on thick strings. She thought that if she kept on looking, the faces would float away up to the ceiling. The beautiful girl came forward and put the doll in Francie's arms. Francie's arms took a natural curve around it. It was as if her arms had waited and grown so just for that doll. The beautiful Mary extended her hand for Francie to shake. In spite of embarrassment and confusion, Francie noted the delicate white hand with the tracery of pale blue veins and the overall oval nails that glowed like delicate pink seashells. The lady talked as Francie walked back awkwardly to her seat. She said, "You have all seen an example of the true Christmas spirit. Little Mary is a very rich little girl and received many beautiful dolls for Christmas, but she was not selfish. She wanted to make some poor little Mary, who is not as fortunate as herself, happy. So she gave the doll to that poor little girl who is named Mary too." Francie's eyes smarted with hot tears. "Why can't they," she thought bitterly, "just give the doll away without saying I am poor and she is rich? Why couldn't they just give it away without all the talking about it?" This was not all of Francie's shame. As she walked down the aisle, the girls leaned toward her and whispered hissingly, "Beggar, beggar, beggar." It was beggar, beggar, beggar all the way down the aisle. Those girls felt richer than Francie. They were as poor as she, but they had something she lacked: pride. And Francie knew it. She had no compunctions about the lie and getting the doll under false pretenses. She was paying for the lie and for the doll by giving up her pride. She remembered the teacher who had told her to write her lies instead of speaking them. Maybe she shouldn't have gone up for the doll, but should have written a story about it instead. But no, having the doll was better than any story about having a doll. When she stood to sing the Star-Spangled Banner in closing, Francie put her face down close to the doll's face. There was the cool, delicate smell of painted china, the wonderful, unforgettable smell of a doll's hair, the heavenly feel of new gauze doll's clothes. The doll's real eyelashes touched her cheek, and she trembled in ecstasy. The children were singing, "O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Francie held one of the doll's tiny hands tightly. A nerve in her thumb throbbed, and she thought the doll's hand twitched. She almost believed the doll was real. She told Mama the doll had been given to her as a prize. She dared not tell the truth. Mama hated anything that smacked of charity, and if she knew, she'd throw the doll away. Neely didn't snitch on her. Francie now owned the doll, but had yet another lie on her soul. That afternoon, she wrote a story about a little girl who wanted a doll so much that she was willing to give over her immortal soul to purgatory for eternity if she could have the doll. It was a strong story, but when Francie read it over, she thought, "That's all right for the girl in the story, but it doesn't make me feel any better." She thought of the confession she would have to make the next Saturday. She resolved that no matter what penance Father gave her, she would triple it voluntarily. She still felt no better. Then she remembered something. Maybe she could make the lie a truth. She knew that when Catholic children received confirmation, they were expected to take some saint's name for a middle name. What a simple solution! She would take the name of Mary when she was confirmed. That night, after the page from the Bible and the page from Shakespeare had been read, Francie consulted Mama. "Mama, when I make my confirmation, can I take Mary for a middle name?" "No." Francie's heart sank. "Why?" "Because when you were christened, you were named Francie after Andy's girl." "I know, but you were also named Mary after my mother. Your real name is Mary Frances Nolan." Francie took the doll to bed with her. She lay very still so as not to disturb it. She woke up from time to time in the night and whispered Mary and touched the doll's infinitesimal slipper with a light finger. She trembled at feeling the thin bit of soft, smooth leather. It was to be her first and her last doll. That's an amazing story, right? Gosh. I still feel like that's a good place to stop. I know we just had a bunch of friends join. I hope you can. Well, and then Tabatai they probably steam. They probably steam. Yeah, they steam and fry and bake all kinds of things. They probably stream next Sunday about this time. But if you are free, it would be so great if you could come join us. Unless I hear otherwise, that folks don't want to continue with the book reading, I plan to maybe just do another chunk. We're just shy of halfway through the book. This is our third one. So just sort of judging from that progress, it'll probably take us 7 streams to finish the book. And we could possibly take a break in the middle and do, more wax seals or something like that. But I hope you're all, if it were me, frankly, I would use this stream to go to sleep. So I hope that you are able to relax and sort of follow the story wherever you might have picked it up. We were talking about the fact that there was not only a movie, but also a musical shortly after this book came out. So it was pretty famous at the time, which I think was like 1941 or 43? Originally, first published in 1943. Yeah, so it was pretty famous at the time. But I hope you guys are, I know it's late for some of you. If you're 6 hours ahead of me, then it's after midnight. So go to bed. But I'm glad you're relaxed and can take it easy. Again, let me just come on here to say goodbye. It is dark here, finally, in Hawaii. So yeah, it's evening here as well. They want to say Sinatra was in the movie. We did look. I don't remember. Let's see. This is the musical. Let's look at that next week. This week, I was really surprised to even know that. So I'm looking right now. I'm looking at the musical information. But I think there were some fancy. I think there were some famous people in it at the time. So yeah, it was a pretty big happening at the time. And then I know I got the book in the 80s, and it became one of my favorites. So okay, well, let's say same time next week, and then let's see, that'll just be 15th, and then we've got the 22nd. So it'll be several weeks until we have the holiday weekend where I will have time to do extra streaming. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yes, I hope you guys all have a great week. Thank you again for Tabatai Cooking for the raid. That was amazing. And thanks for everybody who came in. We've got some people on watch streaks. Love that. We got people renewing their subscriptions. Thank you, Backpack Barbs. Appreciate that so much. And again, all of our streamer friends who stop in, and then also our mods who are just so helpful and supportive, and we love that. So I hope you guys have a great week to come and get in the holiday mood if that's your thing. I guess it's time that we all start working on that. And I will see you next Sunday. Much love and take care of yourselves. Have a lovely week. Yes, hugs to you as well. Great. See you guys later. Let's end with this song, Tea with a Troubadour. Because we got a tea theme song. It's perfect. So we'll go out on that one. Okay. Love ya. Bye. Take care.